Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. This is a bunch of audios I was going to put out individually on first the Gratefulness Meditation channel, but I'm going to put it up on both the Gratefulness Meditation channel and the backup channel. And it's important spiritual stuff, experience if I have, videos I'm watching of Chargy in the olden days, and just a bunch of different things. And um, I decided to use all these things in the Journey series. So a better way to watch if you're a member, then it's probably better to watch it in a Journey series. Although the last audio is going to be from the 56th edition of the Journey series, the first audio, because I had just finished the 155th edition of the Journey series, and I'd already rendered the video when something happened today. Today's Thursday, August 29th. I just finished the Journey series, and then something happened, which I thought was relevant to all this stuff that I'm talking about here. It was a continuation of an audio I made earlier in the day. But anyways, this is all self-explanatory. Here's the audios from these, various, events that have happened the last couple of weeks. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Today is Sunday, August 25th. I've just been doing a lot of videos on the Democratic National Convention and just, how low that the political process has sunk here in America. This is, of course, not about that. But, I covered each day, and each video was over 2 hours. One was 4 hours. And I produced a lot of content. It's been a whole thing. A little bit of a headache today. Like I had one yesterday. It's sort of lingering before it goes away. Sunday, Sats on. Sometimes it happens. I'll get a headache on Saturday night associated with the Sats on, all these things. This video might be a standalone video on Gratefulness Meditation, or the other channel, probably Gratefulness Meditation channel. And then I'll put this in the Journey series. So there's a video out there on the Sahaj Marg channel, the Sahaj Marg YouTube channel, called Reverend Chargy Heaven, European Seminar 18 to 23, December 2010. And this guy, Guy Jaris, it's spelled like Guy. I had some good experiences with him. He's somebody who traveled around with Master, a French guy with a beard, and he made this wonderful video back in 2010. The music, again, sometimes the music's a little bit off-putting. It takes away from, the condition of the gathering. But there's a European gathering in 2010. So this was Chargy, no longer traveling, but still, having health issues, like he couldn't do some of the events there. But this is back when, instead of him going to the countries like going to Europe and going to America and going to various other countries in the world and traveling around India, everyone had to go to the ashram in Manapakam. And so they would have the American gathering in India. And 2012, we would have our first one, at least the one I knew about. And my family and I went to that. In 2010, he had one for Europe. And he just always seemed to have he really liked the Europeans and the Americans in the sense of, he had that kind of an intellect. Chargy had, Christian education, Christian school. And then he traveled to various places when his youth. I think he went to Yugoslavia, some of these other Western countries, and he just, I think, really enjoyed the minds and the thinking process of people. They used to say that I want people with Indian hearts and Eastern hearts and Western minds. The hearts of the people from the eastern part of the world, and the minds from the European and American part of the world, which is always kind of a interesting way to look at it. Like we have a capacity for thinking and intellectual capacity and it's our consciousness, really, because you see people coming from the East, you see people from the eastern part of the world being better at school, like Indian people come to America and winning spelling bees, right? Better at the school process, better at math, better at you have these jobs that are given up to foreigners that come in from these countries, and this brain drain that happens. So it isn't about like necessarily IQ or being able to get an education, but it's also thinking for yourself, and the kind of minds that we have, right? Where there's we just don't accept everything, and the whole authority thing I've talked about in the past, right? That's there in these countries where there's just, especially India. But because of that, and there's a lot of I do and I am, a lot of egoism in the West, America, Europe, these other countries. It's a very egotistical, where God's forgotten about, and science and these things is stressed, and people think they're the doers, and so their hearts don't develop. They don't develop a relationship with God, and they don't develop their hearts in terms of loving hearts. So like the Eastern people have that. And so have that combination where you're a critical thinker. You can think for yourself, and you have this, different style of consciousness. But then also you develop your loving heart, and you can surrender to God and submit to God, and you're not thinking of yourself as the doer. So it's like a blend of these two things, right? Where when you come from the West, you have to develop your heart, and when you come from the East, you have to develop your mind. And the brighter mind scam and the shit that Dodgy's doing is because of lack of development of the mind, right? There's that guy I call the Dodgy Truther. He's kind of he's an Indian guy with a sort of Western a consciousness. He's got him and his wife, I'd met his wife briefly, and they're, more intellectual type people, right? And more, scientific based people. And so like he's having a problem with, Dodgy committing a fraud, whereas these other people just, they can't do that. And some of them are smart. They get better grades than I did, in terms of schooling, but they have school smarts, but their consciousness is very limited and obedient, right? But anyways, they had this video, and I was watching, I've seen it before, years and years ago. So I seen it back when it came out, 2010 or 11. And Guy Jaris did a good job of presenting the ashram as heaven. What it was like to go to the ashram as heavenly experience, which so many of us experienced. And, Charji actually points him out there. Like when I traveled in India, I stayed in a flat with Guy and another guy, a preceptor from the center I was from, in the Sunderland area in Northampton, area in a Five College area in Massachusetts. And I spent some time with Guy, and he was one of the guys who was in the store when I just got pissed off and just walked out for no reason, and like was in a life-threatening situation. Like I'm not pissed off, I was restless. And he was just like a nice person, right? I had a number of conversations with the guy, but he has just a saintly energy and just a relaxed presence. He's one of the higher developed souls in the system, right? Like he was the guy, I've told the story that there's an old preceptor in Sri Lanka, and Charji, this guy, Mr. W, came by and left a book, and this guy was traveling to Sri Lanka, and so I don't know how they came, they were, connected, but he left a Sahaj Marg book, and this guy started, and he was a chain smoker, and he told everyone about this book that was left by this guy, Mr. W, and how he read it, and then he went to India to meet Charji, and Charji said, next time you come, I'll make you a preceptor, and he said to Charji, I'm never going to leave you. I'm going to, I don't need to wait till next time. And the guy was made a preceptor, and Charji had him give the first satsang at Sunday satsang, which is a big deal. There's thousands of people, and 3,000 or whatever people. Sri Lanka is in relationship to, in India, it's like how Cuba is to Florida. It's like 50 miles off the coast, but he had to fly back right after satsang. Like he had to leave, say that's all, and get up and walk and hurry to the airport, right? And he said he had this amazing experience giving the city, like some profound spiritual experience. Like he was like, he couldn't believe what was going on and how, magnificent the sitting was. Like he just, like he had no idea, like it was some incredible experience, right? And so the guy tells his story, and he goes, then a year later, Guy Jaris comes, and he tells Guy this story, and Guy goes, well, this is what really happened. And a year before he got this book from Mr. W, Charji was sitting there, Guy was sitting with him. And Charji said, I want to have a preceptor in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is, most of the people are Sinhalese, and they're it's a nightmare country. And there was a young preceptor there whose dad was just taken. Like, I saw this guy again in 2020, this young preceptor, and he had a girlfriend, and we hung out with him. He's kind of a neat kid, but he'd been sort of traumatized because when I saw him in 2010, he said, "You're so big and fat." And I said, "Well, we got divorced, my ex and I," and he was like shocked, like he was stunned, and I didn't talk to him again. He's like, "You got all big and fat." And so I must have, put on significant weight because he took off his hat, and I didn't recognize him at first. And then, we had spent some time, hung out with him or whatever it was. But the Sinhalese people, so there's Tamil people that are from, Kamala Harris, these people who are from that part of the country. Chennai's their big city, and it's mostly Brahmin, or there's the Brahmin caste, and there's, of course, lower castes in every place. But, the top caste is Brahmin caste, and they become teachers and politicians and doctors and, professional people like that, right? Like, they don't become like Bollywood stars. Like, that's, the warrior class that's, often Muslim or something from North India. They have these different, castes and specificity of their caste, right? And the Tamil caste the Tamil people are about 10% of the population in Sri Lanka. And they have this group called the Tamil Tigers that seems to be controlled by the Sinhalese government at times and by foreign interests at other times. And they're like a terrorist group, right? And they're, so the Sinhalese people are always harassing the Tamil people, the minority 10%. And this kid's father, this Sinhalese police came when he was 10 years old and took him. And they hadn't seen him since. He was 18. He was like one of the younger preceptors. And he told this story, like his dad, they just took him, right? And this other guy who was a preceptor, they came to his house and they were searching through the house. And some guy, one of his friends, had just sent him a picture of the leader of the Tamil Tigers in an email. And they got on his computer and they searched thoroughly through it, but missed the email or missed the picture that was attached to it. But if they saw that picture, this guy would have been in jail. Like, it was one of those, like almost kind of miracles that they didn't, because they're just really harsh on it. And the government's so corrupt, and we had such a, it was a tough time. We had to go there. We probably went there 4 or 5 times in terms of getting our visas, right? And we stayed there for 2 months before that, and a lot that happened. That was the end of the last time I saw my ex, and, things fell apart, right? It was when the splitting of the marriage finally happened there and all this stuff. And a lot of things happened there, like a lot of, it was a tumultuous time, right? But anyway, so getting back to it, this guy says, Guy Jari says, let me tell you what really happened. Charji looked at Sri Lanka and wanted to put a preceptor there. And he combed the country, like in his mind. He was just sitting there meditating. And he sees a guy in his internal world. He sees a guy chain smoking. He sees a guy lighting one cigarette with another. This guy was an avid chain smoker. Oh, this was the other part of the guy's story, right? That, like, right before he went to India and started, they were doing the meditation. Right before he started, he was smoking all the time. He's smoking like 2 or 3 packs of cigarettes a day, like crazy amounts. And he had a pack hidden somewhere in like an area, like just emergency pack of cigarettes. And they had these, you get these horrific rainstorms out there. It's hard to really, the rainstorms they get there, like the typhoon season or whatever it is, the rainy season. It's hard to really express it's like these hurricane level rains all the time. Like, it's just pounding. Like, even with an umbrella, you're getting soaked in a short walk. The streets flood, 2 inches of water on the ground. It's just, this pounding rain. And it rained for 3 days. They lost electricity, and he couldn't go out to the store to get a cigarette. And he looked for his pack, and it was gone. and he just sort of like broke down, like he was freaking out, and then he just stopped smoking, like he never smoked again. And then he started Sahaj Marg, and then all these things happened. And so there's some probably details I'm forgetting, but that was the essence of the story. So Guy Jarvis goes to him. This is what really happened. Chargie's combed the country, and he saw this guy chain smoking. And he said, "That's the guy. I'm going to make this guy a preceptor." Not knowing him, the guy had never practiced Sahaj Marg. He started cleaning him and working on him. And, the first thing I had to go was his, this attachment to cigarettes. And he called the guy to the, to the country, called him to India, right? And Guy was like, "That's the real story. That's, that's the story that really happened." And the guy was kind of stunned, right? And he, now he knows like this two-part, his experience and the work that was being done on him before to prepare him for this, whatever it is, right? But anyways, Guy made this movie, and it's a good movie. It really shows and demonstrates what it's like to go to the ashram and be around Charji as best as you can for the. Again, I would remove a lot of the music if I was going to do the film. Like the music is unnecessary. There's a beat that they have, dun 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 dun. You hear it. It's kind of off-putting because it messes around with the vibrations you're receiving from, being at the ashram, right? Like that music isn't indicative of the kind of, rhythm and energy and vibration that's at the ashram. But other than that, it's a well-done movie. And I just watched the other video on, Chargy going to Molina, so it's like I'm having this reminiscent type of experience. And this morning I turned the video on because I had a headache and I wasn't, I'm kind of got a video to edit, but I don't really want to, usually when I have these Sunday morning headaches, they go away. And I feel kind of blissed out, like their serotonin level goes way up. And so I'm waiting for that to take on any sort of editing. I got some farm work to do. And there was this scene where Chargy was talking about marriage and some other things, which he often talks about with Europeans and Americans. And they combed the room of people, and I recognize some of the people. And there are a couple kids there. And I'm like, I know those kids, but like I knew them as teenagers. And like I'm kind of trying to remember who they are. And they're these two French kids who the boy was a boy who came and told me my younger son had broken his arm. They were best friends. They hung out. He's a rapper now. And we saw his mother and stepdad in 2020. And, my son now is taller than me. And, some time had gone by since we had left in 2016, 4 years. And the daughter hung out with my two daughters, especially my younger one. And they were nice kids, really nice kids. They were homeschooling. The mom was like a little crazy. And she married a much older guy who's really nice. I really liked him. Like when we saw each other, we gave each other a big hug, which is, rare for me. But somebody I just, immediately liked. They're, French people. The mom was a little bit crazy, but kind of interesting. I think she was like Hungarian descent, but she was, living in France. And they had a house that they turned into like a Airbnb with like 9 bedrooms or something. And they had a couple different Abhyasis manage it for them where they traveled to India. They stayed in India for a while. And her husband her ex-husband was sitting there with the kids. I only met him once. I kind of thought he was okay, but she had really hammered him and said what a horrible person he was. But the kids loved him. And he came to India and hung out with them. And we talked. He seemed like a nice guy, but, there was some contentious aspects to the divorce. But I remember all this stuff. Like I'm seeing these, all this stuff, and I've never seen these kids young. Like these kids were, 10, 11 years old, 12 years old, 13, or whatever they were. The girl was a little bit older than the boy. But, seeing all these people that I hadn't seen in years and, how it was, right? When Chargy, and like there's been such a huge fall off when Chargy was gone. It's kind of, I don't want to say pathetic, but just, trying to retain that, right? And like I can't recreate it. Like I can't recreate it for myself, and I can't recreate it for you all who do gratefulness meditation and people who are doing it. Because I can't do shit like, spot somebody in Sri Lanka chain smoking and go, that guy should be a preceptor. Like there's levels to the stuff that operating on a whole different level of consciousness that I experienced and saw. and read about and understood, but, limited to that, right? And it kind of sucks, like, there's something that's lost. Now, when Charji was prepared by Babaji, when Babaji was prepared by Lalaji, he did whatever he did, right? And he had some, gurus around him, some Sufi gurus in, northern India, some influence from that, so he kind of had master, but not really. And they're not a part of the Sahaj Marg line in that sense. They all have these lines of masters in these traditions there, right? These various traditions, all these places. There's lots of these spiritual organizations that have, to a line of 20 different guys, like they have, with the popes in Catholicism. But, it's kind of different Sahaj Marg. Babaji met Lalaji 6 times, 7 times in his life, traveled to his house. They didn't have the internet phone service, so that was it. And Lalaji died without any kind of a plan for his. There was no organization. He had 200 people that would come to his house, and he would, over his period of time, it was like a total of 200 people or so, come and go. They didn't necessarily, avid practitioners. Some of them met him like once or twice. He didn't have an organization, and he was somebody who had spiritual abilities that imparted spiritual training for free to people who came to his house, right? And Babaji intercommuned with him for 13 years, and Lalaji prepared him to become the master of the system. And there was no, organization. Babaji was like 5 people that supported Babaji when his preceptor said, hey, Lalaji said this is a successor. He got up at group meditation, wherever they were doing. And there's probably like 20 people there, and 5 of them said, all right, we'll support you. And that was it. Or that was all the Lalaji people. And then Babaji started something new, right? But Babaji was taken through all these points, these 13 points, right? These, yatra points. And he experienced all the stuff that was in there. All the conditions. Like he took 20 years. And there's other people who are rushed through, but they don't have the experiences of each region. And Lalaji was there in their communing with them, as were other, higher developed souls. And he was being trained, and these spiritual centers were being opened up and charged with power. And, it was extensive. And, I've had some experiences, but like nothing like that, right? And then Charji was at, training with Babaji from 1964 to 1983. So it was in 19 years. He met Babaji, I think, in 65 or something like that, right? Maybe he met him in 64. I think he started in 64 and met him in 65. And in 74, he made Charji the secretary of the mission in the 70s. I don't know when, 1970, whatever. And Charji just ran everything. And he traveled with Babaji exclusively. They went away for 3 months together, all around Europe and then to America. And he would take care of Babaji. He would pack his hookah. He would do all those things. And then Babaji would have him experience these spiritual experiences, which Charji documented in his Footsteps books. And there was a time, like, for example, there was a couple of sittings that are talked about. There's the one I've read before where everything's cleaned out. Like, he talks about Babaji's. Okay, I went for a walk with my wife and my dogs, and I found a bonus reading. And I wanted to talk about this. This is from Charji's In His Footsteps. It's from 1977, page 7, volume 3 of In His Footsteps. Master then gave us, he's talking about Babaji here. Master then gave us a short sitting, about 15 minutes duration, much to the unconcealed joy of the Abhyasis present, who had not expected such a blessing on this occasion. I felt tears coming into my eyes. I recalled, without any volition on my part, or even the merest wish to do so, all the wonderful qualities of my beloved Master. The thought arose spontaneously and automatically in my mind, and I seem to recall, as if in recollection, Master's divine love for his Abhyasis, his unfailing courtesy and gentlemanly behavior even with the smallest of us, his permanent cheerfulness, his humor, etc. The thought came to my mind that perhaps this was an aspect of the cleaning too. Perhaps the impressions created in my mind by those qualities of the Master, noble though they are, have also to be erased by cleaning. This was the next thought, the reason being that otherwise the love for the master, which may be there, would be a love conditioned by the existence of these qualities, very qualities in the master. A love dependent on these 5 qualities for this existence would be no true love. A further thought than surfaced, we human beings are all conditioned in our loves mainly because of the presence of such qualities in those whom we love. Take away those qualities and the love too fades. But true love must exist without the beloved having necessarily to possess any such qualities whatsoever. Then alone could the love be called true love. This was the thought expanded into the next thought. Our master loves us in precisely this way, nay, even where he would be justified in not loving us, such as when an Abhyasi was repulsive or hateful qualities. Even then a master is able to love the Abhyasi. I then had a glimmering of the idea of the sort of timid realization of the divine or universal love really is. Such a love pervades everything in the universe, because such a love does not need any qualities or characteristics to love, and is therefore exists independently of all qualities in the beloved, good or bad, good, bad, and indifferent. All these thoughts came into my mind during this brief sitting and revealed to me the nature of the cleaning process, how deeply it has to probe, and how comprehensive it has to be in its application and function. And so this is just one of the profound sittings he talks about here. I've always, that's like one of my favorite sections of the literature. I got to turn to another page here. So, it's kind of hard to have to hold the mic and then hold the book. It's the whole thing. And take my glasses off. I might get back to that passage in a second. But this is something I just happened to find. So there's been these owls. Well, I'll talk about that. Let me just read this first because I got it all set up. So this is on page 29, same time. This is April 10th, 1977, Sunday. Master was giving a sitting to 2 groups, one at 6 p.m. and the second at 7 p.m. after dinner. Master spoke to KV Reddy for nearly 2 hours, with his final hookah of the day bubbling away nicely, telling him many episodes from Lalaji's life. Master, with a twinkle in his eyes, asked us whether we were sleepy, adding humorously, "I am like an owl. Do you understand what an owl is? It is a night bird. I also enjoy the night. Like an owl, I also stay awake at night. Now look here, the owl is supposed to be very wise. In the Western world, it is a symbol of intelligence, but side by side it brings destruction. Wherever an owl goes, there is the possibility of destruction. In this, there is the idea of great importance, though it is hidden. In our country, people are afraid of the owl, and sometimes in the villages, if they hear its cry, and people on the village stay awake all night and keep chasing it away because of the fear of destruction." Then he laughed and said, I am also like an owl, but you looking at Reddy. I hope you will not be afraid of me. It is, of course, true that I am also occasionally involved in such work, meaning destruction. But brother, it is always necessary to destroy evil, and this is, of course, the work of a saint. Okay, so he said, Master reportedly told KV Reddy not to be frightened because of this story. He repeated his being like an owl several times and enjoyed the joke at his own expense enormously. We went to bed at midnight. So I read that to my wife because we've had an owl. Well, so first of all, 7, I'm born on the 7th, July 7th, so I'm 7-7. And I'm not a numbers person, but, And page 29, where this thing came from, I started my practice when I was 29 years old. And so, there was something there. So I told my wife, and she was like, there's that show. We watched a Native American show. I think it was a mystery kind of show. And all the people in the tribe, if there was an owl, they would turn the picture over and put it face down, like they never wanted to look at the owl. There's a whole thing with owls, right? In terms of, you have these animal guides, spirit animals, and things like that. And so, I've been up at night now for I don't know when I did that video about the transmission flowing and things, but I've had trouble sleeping. Charger used to sleep for a few hours and then he would do work from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. and then sleep a little bit more. I know that they were, they did a lot of their work at night, especially since it was easier to work on Abhyasis when they were sleeping. And I had this transmission flowing through me. It was August, I forget the date, whenever Lalaji's Mahasamadhi date was. Around that time, maybe it was 2 Tuesdays ago. And so it's been a while. I've been waking up, sometimes meditating, sometimes, if the transmission flowing, sometimes just not sleeping. And, we've had this owl outside. We've been sleeping with the window open because it got really cool. And we had the window open, and there was an owl first there was an owl. I walked outside and I saw this owl. There's a tree right across from our front, where our front door is. And the owl flew away. Like, it was big. Just like, I've only seen an owl very, in terms of out in the wild, not like in a zoo or something like that. Probably like 7, 8 times. Of course, I've heard the owl quite a bit. And there's been an owl that's screeching, like a little screech owl or something. It's got a unique call. It's outside our window. And it's been, when my wife woke up and I said, "Can you hear the owl?" And she heard it. She was like interested. She had read this thing about how UFOs and aliens are always associated with owls. When people see a UFO or something, there's often an owl. I talked about coming down from the Mesa, Los Alamos, and this white owl, like it was white underbelly, flew over the car. And the thing looked like it was giant. It looked like it was like 8 foot, its wingspan was like, 50, like some kind of a, one of those condors or something. Like the whole, wider than the car. The wingspan was wider and the wings were bigger. I said, like, the thing was giant, right? I couldn't believe how big it was. Flew right over the top, right over the windshield. It was probably about 10 feet from the car. And my headlights hit it, and I was like, oh my God, right? Like, I had seen things going down this mesa. There's this giant elk once I saw, and the moon one time. It was the biggest moon I've ever seen. It was just bizarre, right? In Los Alamos, where that national laboratory is. I worked there for a while at a youth center, and it was just a weird place. But they have these cool mesas that have these flat tops. There's mountains with a flat top, and they build civilizations there or something. In this case, they built the place where they, perfected the atomic bomb and all that shit, right? But anyways, so these owls I've been listening to probably for like 2 weeks. They come and go. My wife and I heard them. Then there was a second owl that was answering the owl back that had a completely different call, right? We also have a hawk that just circles and screeches. It did it last year, and we saw it with a partner, so we don't know why it's calling all the time. And we have, these birds that we have, red-winged blackbirds that have now disappeared in the summer, but they're here most of the summer. They're here from the spring till about July, and they raise babies. One of them was like trying to dive bomb us when we'd walk around the pasture, and I have some video of turning around. The thing, just like right before it come and hit me in the head, it would pull up, right? With these red-winged blackbirds that seem to be the badasses, because we had an oriole, there's a little pond in our front yard, and the oriole chased out a couple of robins, and then the red-winged blackbird came in, and all the other birds, the oriole and all the other birds flew out. But the red-winged blackbirds just harass the shit out of these hawks. Like, you can see them when they fly over where the nests are, and there's like 10 of them just dive bombing the thing and pecking at its feathers in the air. And we also have these meadowlarks. And so some of these smaller birds are harassing the hawks, and then after their babies are, fledged, then they stop doing it. And so, there's that. But this hawk is, it's past that time. And this hawk is just out there screeching, all the time. Like, it's not a pleasant sound. And, I like these types of birds, but it's just almost like annoying. It's just screeching the whole time we're walking around the pasture. But anyways, going back to the owl, we've had this owl presence for the past, couple of weeks. Of course, the political situation, and there's just been war with Israel and on Lebanon now, and that's escalating and all this stuff, right? The beginning of this destruction that Babaji was, creating. I mean, Babaji was creating a plan where the current system would be taken down. So I just want to throw that in there. But going back to the sitting where, Charji had this experience of the, all these qualities that would make you love Babaji disappearing, and just, love of the love itself, pure love, right? And how the master of the system loves everybody, even though they don't deserve love, right? Based in the qualities and who they are. Because he sees who you can be in the future, and, there's that kind of element, right? Seeing past your, the lowness of your, whatever you have, your self-hatred, your desires, all the negative qualities that you have, and seeing the pure essence of who you are as a soul, right? That's the kind of, relationship you have with the master of the system. And these In the Footsteps books are loaded with this stuff, right? all these experiences that he had. And, Babaji went through these experiences, which he documented in his diary when he was, intercommuning with Lalaji, and he would talk about these experiences that he had, right? Downloading, information and programs and powers and things being charged and points being charged. And there's a couple of other these experiences I can think of offhand. I mean, these books are loaded with them. But there was a time Chargy was meditating, and he was surrounded by this color blue. And he felt this peace and bliss and, just like this joy, this incredible experience. And he comes out of the sitting, and he said, "What was that, Babaji?" And he said, "Oh, that's eternity." And he said, "Well, that was amazing." He goes, "Yeah, I only let you taste it for a little bit, because if you stayed there too long, you never want to leave, right?" And so, like, these kind of things. And a lot of us have had sittings and experiences where we just wish we could feel that way forever. Like, we don't want it to stop. And that's one of the dangers of spiritual life, that there are things that are peaceful and pleasurable, but they're not the goal. They're not, they're not where you're supposed to just, bask in that forever. Like, it's experience, and, it's there and, has its purpose, but it's not, it's just a step along the path, right? And there's another one where this guy, Don Savrin, was, I think, in a talk. I mean, I talked to this guy a few times personally. Either he told me this personally or he gave a talk and I was there. But him and Chargy were getting a sitting from Babaji. At the end of the sitting, Babaji said, "What did you experience?" And Don said whatever he experienced. And Chargy was like, he was still like out of it. And he like kind of, licked his lips a little bit, was trying to, like come back from the sitting. He said, "It feels like you took a nail," and he pointed to like the top of his head, "and you pounded a nail 5 inches into my skull." And Chargy later wrote about that sitting, and Babaji said that this point had been open, right? And there was extremely painful experience that he went through to have that point open. Like, there's these things that people go through, the masters have to go through to have, these powers be given to them, to have these spiritual centers. Like, it's just not all, it's like a butterfly hatching out of its cocoon. Some things are just painful, right? Which is a part of all that. And, years of training. Now, Kamlesh was around Chargy for the last 7 years of his life and came and went. But it seemed like Chargy had to put a lot of the stuff into Kamlesh in a short period of time. And I heard Kamlesh getting angry a lot during that time, hard to be around. He was trying to digest all this stuff, which, makes it kind of a rush job, right? But, the work was done. I saw the work be done to him. And he just didn't absorb it, just didn't take, right? He hasn't been able to, whatever happened there. Again, there's a story there that he forced it, and, they sabotaged the earlier guy. There's just stuff about it, right? Which, I have to believe is all part of some plan, not something that the mission had to go through. Like I said before, it's like, because that's all I can believe, because otherwise it's pointless pursuing this, right? It's a dead system. It's failed. And it's just like any of these religions. It's pointless to do them. As long as you're connecting to God and you're benefiting, then what's the difference? Like, I'm connecting to God and benefiting, but, not having a living master to do these things, to go through these experiences with, is a loss, right? What I'm saying here is these things are necessary for a person to evolve, right? Like, you can, by self-effort, you can get so far. Jesus, whatever it was, Jesus actually had gurus and things. Jesus had some trainers and gurus, but he only got to point 2. And everyone thinks, in Christianity, they think he's the son of God, right? But he's just at point 2. Every preceptor is at point 2 with their points charged, and they can transmit, which Jesus couldn't do, right? So, like, it's very limited what he experienced, but that was what he did by self-effort was amazing. You can't compare, you being made a preceptor. I was 2 years into the system, I was made a preceptor. And the cleaning I went through was, brutal. That trip to India, like 5 weeks of hell. Again, I got so sick and I was so miserable and just so everything, right? Chargy had migraine headaches forever. Like, he just had them. And Babaji did everything he could. He brought him to this guy who Babaji thought he was the world's best healer. And of course, Babaji could do everything on the spiritual level. And even with that, they couldn't stop the headaches. They said, this is God's will. I can't do anything. And so, Chargy had these experiences like, these brutal migraines and really bad health. Babaji had an ulcer and, he was frail and sickly and weak a lot of the time. And he just wouldn't eat and he just wouldn't, he neglected his physical body to some extent. And he just, like there's a time somebody said, oh, Babaji, how's your stomach? He goes, it was fine till you asked me. I wasn't ignoring it. And when you asked me that question, now it hurts. Like I'm not, it was fine until you asked me the question, right? And brought it to my attention. But Lalaji died. He had an abscess, a hole in his liver. And he was in excruciating pain. And there's like, they made a movie of his life. And there's a moment where he's going to get an operation. But a British Raj, who was considered more important than him, even though Lalaji was this groundbreaking, spiritual giant, but people didn't know that. And a British Raj, one of these kings was appointed by the British government, like an Indian king. It was sick, and he came in, and so the doctors all ran to take care of him. And Lalaji snuck out of the hospital and said, because he didn't want to be cut open and have an operation that just seemed like that kind of medicine seemed, like demonic to him. But all his relatives pressured him into getting it. Of course, he ended up dying from the hole in his liver at a relatively young age. He was 58 years old. He lived from 1973 to 1931. His death date was August 14th. So I've had 10 days. It's 11 days where I've had issues with sleep, where there's some kind of spiritual thing going on. Of course, the owl being a part of it, right? But anyways, let me get to the point. So I watched this thing the other day that whatever I made that video last week it's looking at the Molina ashram. I was just noticing people, right? Like all these people that I knew and how young they looked, and this is years and years ago. So 1996, I had been practicing 3 years. I had just come back from India and was a preceptor. I'd been made a preceptor. And when I saw myself there, I recognized that person, but it was weird. It took me a while to go, oh, that's me, right? And I didn't feel like it was me, right? It was kind of weird. I don't want to call it dysphoria. Like I know it was me, and I remember, I remember the gathering. I remember things of being at that gathering. I didn't remember that particular moment where Charji was speaking. I was behind him, but I, could reconstruct the memory to the extent knowing that I did security, and this other guy who was my friend who was in charge of security, my friend at the time, and I was, helping him out, and he was there in front of me. And then, one of these other people, this woman, Mrs. C, was in front of us. She ended up being this nightmare and, spied on me and my current wife for my ex and all these things, right? Like this person. And, when I saw myself, like it wasn't like I was looking at me, like I was looking at some other person, like this other version. Because people talk about the alternative universe, like some sort of mega, the multi-universe or something, where people have all these choice points and, they divide off into these various universes. The problem with those universes, there's only one universe where you would make all the right choices, right? Where you would make all the divine choices, which is what Babaji did, in terms of at least the later part of his life, where you would surrender your ability to choose the wrong thing, to make the wrong choice, because that's what it is. And all this freedom, I've just discussed this in my videos about freedom. The Democrats try to use the word freedom that the Republicans have used. But freedom is really about choosing the wrong thing. Freedom is choosing, there you have one right choice, which is what God and your soul wants you to do. And it's a very narrow path. And there's an infinite amount of wrong choices in which people engage in, right? But anyways, so it was weird for me to see myself. And, I had a reaction to it. I talked a little bit about it, but not really so much. Because I looked more spiritual than I would have thought I looked, right? And spiritual isn't, I don't know what the word is, but, I look better than I, not in terms of, what I look like as in terms of my, outer appearance, but just like, I looked spiritual, like my, eyes were soft and, like I had a good spiritual condition. Of course, I just made a preceptor, but I saw myself better than what I think of myself, right? Not that I'm, overly negative about myself. Like I'm not, I don't beat myself up or, whatever, but I was like, more spiritual or just more evolved than I know my thoughts and what I think about and my commitment and my work ethic to doing whatever, I mean, I've always done my spiritual practice and I've connected to Sahaj Marg, but, I'm always know that I could be better and, I'm kind of a slacker and these things, right? My negative thoughts, things I say, insulting things, mean things I say to people, about people, and my videos and, some of the harshness and, some of the just being, I can be pretty brutal and, just these things, right? And, I've always known that there's potential there because of my first sittings and then things I've experienced, and that there's something there. Like I've done things in the past that, led to me being able to be an Abhyasi in this life. And there's some, spiritual capital I brought into this life, and I've created some more spiritual capital by doing whatever I've done here, right? But, it's mostly, I mean, I have a much more human version of like what I am as a person, as an ego than I would as a soul, like the expression of my soul. And I kind of saw it, like it was kind of a weird thing, like something that wasn't an accident. But I started, seeing myself in a different light, right? Not in an egotistical way, but, that I've been given some stuff and I have, accomplished some and I've contributed to my spiritual journey. And I thought about two things that happened. My first initial sittings that were profound, like maybe the biggest experiences I've ever had were those initial sittings where I experienced something, I think on a, one of the, maybe the ultimate condition, the central region condition that you experience at the end of your journey. And then I got a little taste of it, but whatever it was, like, I don't know if that's true or not, but, that's something I've considered as being what it is. But whatever it was a profound experience, my first three sittings. And then the rain that happened and all the timing of it and these things. And then when I was made a preceptor, at the end of it, when, very profound experience in the final sitting. And then Charji was chanting in Hindi. And then all of a sudden it sounded like 1,000 voices. And I told that guy, Don Saverin, about it. I said, you should tell Charji. And I said, what was it with the 1,000 voices? Because he was telling me what happened in the sitting. Your yatra was completed from point 1 to point 2, and point 2 was charged. And that was like, when he charged the point, it was just this happy juice. Like it was, I could feel it, and it was like amazing. And then, this thing with the chanting. And, when I heard 1,000 voices, and I don't know if anybody else has heard that. And I've thought about that occasionally over the years, right? And so I've had these two big experiences. It's not enough, like, compared to what Charji was trained. Like, there's difference in, what I have and other people have, things that keep me going. But something was done to me, right? And then, of course, doing what I do here. I felt like I got some of Charji's ability to speak publicly, or his giving talks and conceptualize and articulate things. Like, we're different people. Like, Charji was a perfectionist. He was a person, I always say perfectionist, he was very meticulous and would do meticulous work where I just get it done. Like, just, I'm not looking for perfection or, any of these things. I don't hold myself to that kind of standard. And we're much different people. Like, he was the eldest and he, I'm a youngest, right? Like, we different, youngest are often much different than the oldest. The eldest are much, more prepared or aggressive in their material life, and they grow up faster, and they, have all these different qualities, right? My wife is an eldest, and she, oftentimes people in my life, my closest relative in my family, my brother, who, of course, we're not talking now, but the most influential one, when he was an eldest, right? Like, oftentimes eldest and youngest get along, and they have different perspectives and different ways of being, and, there's all these things, right? I'm a much different person than Charji, but this ability to conceptualize the material and, express it in a verbal format I've gotten some of what he had, right? Like, I didn't have it before. And, when he was the last years of his life, there was all this, I had suffered like pain and sore throats. Of course, this happens now from doing this job, but oftentimes it was the spiritual pain, like after sittings, there was energy and vibrations in my throat area. And, it led to me doing this. Like some work was done on me, like the power of the voice or whatever. Of course, people report feeling transmission from these talks and things I do. So, this is something that I was made into. There's something here, right? One specific work that I'm suited for. Like, I feel like I'm really good at this job. It's the thing I'm best at. And, it doesn't seem like a difficult job, but very few people could do it. In fact, I don't know if anybody else, they'd have to have the work done and have the preparation to do it, the spiritual work. Specifically the Sahaj Marg portion of me being a truther. But I just see things differently, and my, being dyslexic and being introverted and all these things. But, those qualities don't lend themselves well to administrative positions, right? Like, I couldn't be the master of the system. Like, they're just, the things that I'd have to be as a human being just don't exist, right? Like, I can see things clearly and I can articulate them, but I don't do well in an administrative position. I stress out, I can't, deal with people the way you need to. Like, there's things like that, right? Like, the master of the system is not just a spiritual potential of who you are. Like, Sister Kasturi was in some ways, better spiritually than Charji was. I don't want to say better, but, Babaji had said she would be perfect if she, to fill the role of the master if she weren't a woman, because men have to, there has to be a man because of destructive work and some of these other things, right? Like, it isn't a role that a woman could do, but she was certainly very as spiritual as anybody, right? Sister Kasturi was a famous Indian saintly woman who was just an amazing preceptor. She worked on Charji a bit, all these things. And, Babaji just loved her, and, she was maybe his best disciple in some ways. But she wasn't capable of doing the role of the master, just like Madame Alin, who does the medium, who's a medium. Like, she couldn't be a master. Like, she's going to come back, I think, as a man and be one of the masters in the future. And whatever that means now with Daji and what's happened with the system, I don't know. But anyways, it's hard for me to explain the whole thing that I'm trying to get to here. But, I saw myself in a different light. And, there's no chosen ones in the Sahaj Marg system. Like, everything has to be worked for. And Kamlesh is a perfect example of that, because he had the work done. He had potential. He was a good preceptor. He was into it. He had various abilities, and he shit the bed, right? He just failed. And, unless this is what he's supposed to do, whatever that is, right? It's not, but whatever we see right now on the human level and on a spiritual level is failure. He's not lived up to what is expected of the master of the system. And he's taken the mission in the complete opposite direction, and, it's a disaster. Like, at least that's what it appears. Whatever long-term plans or whatever pain and growing pains the mission has to go through because of it, that's not for me to see. I could say that that's the case. Yeah, sure. Like, yeah, that's totally probably, what it is, but, like, I can't see that far ahead. I can understand, I can conceptualize how that would work, but not, I can't see into the future and, whatever. And so, seeing myself in a different sort of light as being more spiritual than I give myself credit for, maybe more important to the whatever, because what I'm doing here I think is fairly important. And maybe there's stuff that's in a latent situation in my system that's there, either something, roles that I'm supposed to step into in the future, maybe not in this life, but a future life, and or that there's, stuff that can come out of me. There's a time where my preceptor Fred was giving satsang. And Fred didn't have a lot of spiritual experiences, but he was a wonderful preceptor. And Babaji wrote to Charji saying, I just made this guy Fred a preceptor, and he'll do good work wherever he does. And the number of really good abhyasis that Fred started, there's a long list of people that Fred was their original preceptor. And people I've mentioned in these videos, people who are important in the mission. I mean, some of the most important people in the mission here in America, Fred started. Like, he just had a line of, like, great, introductory sittings, and Babaji said he'd do good work wherever he went, which meant that Fred gave great sittings, but Fred didn't have many good spiritual experiences himself. but as a preceptor, he saw things. And he was giving a sitting, and these people had just returned from India. And he said that he was giving the sitting, and he said that Master Charji had put all these spiritual gifts into these two people returning from India. And he saw these things going out to all the other people, like all of us sitting there. Because it was a wonderful sitting. Like, and, you know, like there's stuff that is put in you for other people. There's things that I say here, and ideas that I have been given that aren't for me. They pass through me, and they're for, you know, you all. In fact, most of my content is that one way or another that kind of situation, which is a very prevalent type of experience that happens in Sahaj Marg, because it's it's like there would be these Sunday readings, like the readings I just did, and there would always be one or two people that felt the reading was just for them. They were struggling with something, and the reading spoke exactly to what they needed to hear, right? But anyways, I feel like, and it isn't like a egotistical boosting situation. Like, it didn't make me feel better about myself, or, I didn't get fired up about it. But like, there's a responsibility that goes with something like that, where you realize that, I mean, I don't want to say like I'm underachieving, because I've always been kind of an underachiever, and, like I'm kind of maxed out right now with what I'm doing on the YouTube channel and just the Gratefullness meditation. Like, I can't imagine taking anything else on, especially things that I don't even know how to do or whatever. And, it's not like I've been given other than that one dream where Charji said, you're a preceptor again. That's all I have, like a dream, to start giving sittings again. I mean, in actuality, in life, I was a preceptor, and Charji made me not a preceptor anymore. And then I had a dream where he said, you're a preceptor again, and I did the Gratefullness meditation based on that. But I have just some of the limited preceptor materials. I'd like to really reread the preceptor book. And I'd like to reread all these books and just go through them again now from a different perspective. And hopefully that would kick in some things. And, I think there's these latent things in my system, but I just don't have the time and the energy for stuff like that, right? Maybe there will be later on where I can reread some of these books. I've started collecting some of them. I don't have all of them. I got caught up in the whispers like everyone else, but there's lots of great literature here as well that's important, and, for the future. Like reading that in the footsteps, I'm like, wow, I should read these books again. But I mean, it's a whole thing, and I can start reading some of them. But usually when I start reading, I go into a meditative state, and, again, like, we'll see what happens, right? But anyways, I don't think I'm doing the best. I'm not even clear on this myself, but, seeing myself almost like as a different person, and looking back at myself, thinking like what I thought of myself then and how I remember myself at that period of time. Like I was, I could see the higher nature that was there, right? Of course, I was standing right next to Charji, and I'd just been made a preceptor, but it was more evident. Like there was something there, the potential, and like like everyone else, I have something to offer and a role to play. And of course, this is part of it here, and there's probably more that I could be doing, and but the circumstances aren't opening up, right? Like I'm not getting, it would just be me creating something. Like I did the Gratefullness meditation channel on my own, and it gets some hundreds of views, more than 100, less than 200, and there's some of the sittings have like lots of, people are doing, maybe 100 people do the sitting. I don't know. Like and that's good. Like that's something, and I feel like there's stuff that's in my system, and I don't know how much this is for everybody, that's been put in there to be saved, right? Some of the spiritual knowledge, some of the spiritual, some of the stuff that has to be preserved from the debacle that's dodgy. And I felt like that's part of my role, to preserve the books and, the stories and things. Like I've read all the books, and I have all the information stored in my system, and then also spiritual energy, in latent form that can be released and things. And, it has to be kept in, human like storage vessels. Like it's one thing to be in the etheric world, but not everybody can reach up to the etheric world to connect to these information. But anyways, I don't know what to say about it, but it was kind of a profound experience, and I'm still kind of dealing with it because I'm watching this stuff, reminiscing. My headache seems to have gone away, so I feel better. I can edit that other video. And I'm just caught up in the world the way it is and what's happening, the world collapsing, of course, dodgy, failing, and not having, I'm not having somebody there to go to, like not someone there to, like not that Chargy gave you direct advice, and not that he would like tell you exactly what to do, especially if you were from the West. In India, he'd more do that, but just have somebody that's there that like would you'd put the stuff in front of them, and I've been able to do that directly with God. Like it's not like that doesn't exist anymore, but it's not there's a hole in there, right? There's a hole in the system, a giant hole, because there has to be a master that's there, and I mean I don't think there'll be another master in my lifetime, and if there is, it'll be different, right? And I don't know what's going to happen, but you know whatever. And so maybe I'll have more thoughts about this. I got to wrap this up. Good. It's over an hour long. But yeah, I'll probably put this up on the other channel and then put it in the Journey series as well. Okay, continuing on. This voiceover, some of it's going to be, I'm going to do two voiceovers, and they're going to be some similar things I'm going to say here. One for my regular channel, and then this is, I'm going to add this to the Journey series as well as to a standalone video on the, maybe I'll put it on both channels, the backup channel and the other channel, because there's some people on the backup channel who don't subscribe to Gratefulness Meditation. And so, the backup channel gets more views than Gratefulness Meditation channel. So there's that. So the first part, I received an email to one of the longtime viewer practitioners who also does, I think, Gratefulness Meditation now. Just a couple of questions. Kana can accommodate 100,000 Abhyasis, so why are they limiting attendance to 20,000? Why build the world's largest meditation hall and then leave it mostly empty? Or do they want it as an explanation for waning interest and low attendance? And so this was the message. Beloved Daji's 69th birthday, September 27th, 28th, and 29th. His birthday's on the 28th. Now, I thought they were going to do 2 sessions. I think last year they did 2 sessions. It says here, dear brothers and sisters, my respectful pranams to you all. With great joy, I invite you to attend the upcoming Bandara to celebrate beloved Daji's 69th birthday at Kani Shantivanam. The main day of celebration will take place on his birthday, September 28th. The Bandara is also continuation of the year-long commemorative celebration of Puja Sri Babaji's Maharaj 125th birthday anniversary, which again, it isn't, because they didn't really celebrate that Charji's. Like, it's just silly. I don't know. Well, let's not get into it. Daji has conveyed that there will be one batch with an upper limit of 20,000 registrations at Kana. You can make your travel in accommodation with residents, all that stuff, right? So they're limited to 20,000 people. And so then there's a registration button, but there's a little blip underneath that. And the Daji Truther just sent me this blip. So these came in. He sent it in a Facebook message. He sends me his stuff in a Facebook message. And so it says here, in my mind, the most blessed occasion for us all is to celebrate the birthday of our living master, beloved Daji. I look forward to seeing you so that together we can fulfill the message Reverend Daji gave at the end of the last Bandara, to make the journey from the human to the humane. The method he gave us to do this is our practice. So let us all begin our preparations for this auspicious event. And it's signed the chairman of the celebrations committee. But he says, he's basically alluding to that, I mean, it's the practice is there. The Daji gave a method to make something from the human to the humane, and all of it. But why is he saying it's the most important celebration? It's the least. The living master is always the least, and that's what the living master should say. And this shouldn't be there. In my mind, who gives a shit about your mind? Like, what are you talking about, bro? No one cares about your opinion, right? Oh, you think Daji's is the best? Like, you're in charge of all the celebrations, and so you're giving favor to Daji's. Are you like? Did you even know Charji? There's no way to compare the two, right? And so, there's no reason to limit it to 20,000. Well, first of all, 2 years ago, Daji tried to cancel Charji's birthday with that bogus message, and people were descending down anyway. They didn't have any open registration. So 4 days before Chargie's birthday, they said, "Oh, we're going to have a gathering," and about 30,000 people just descended on the ashram. You know, they were coming anyway. They just weren't going to be stopped. And so he's tried to limit charges a couple of times, and he's done things to minimize the amount of people that go there. Like he wants, it's like Trump versus Kamala Harris, where Trump gets really upset by the crowd size, right? And how many more people love Chargy more than Dodgy, and so there's obviously something to do with that. And I'm going to tie this into what I was saying earlier. My previous voiceover. I want to get back to all that in a second, but I just had to get this out of the way. But Indians will come anyway. People will come anyway, and they're going to turn people away, right? When people show up and the registration's full, there's no way. And the mission's hurting for money. They're not getting the same donations. Well, that guy I talked to said, a preceptor, senior Indian preceptor in America, said that lots of people are meditating on Chargy's form, so they haven't embraced the living master. I think everybody knows the guy's subpar at some level. They may not admit it. They might feel bought off. They're afraid to talk about it, whatever it is. But deep down, they know the guy sucks. Like he's not nearly what Chargy was, and they know that the mission has fallen off, and the new people coming in suck. They're not spiritual at all, and so they're not digging his birthday celebration. Like they're not coming there. I think there's a lot of Indians in Chennai that used to be. I mean, Chargy could get 20,000 people on a Sunday if everybody showed up just from Chennai alone, right? Like there was, you'd have 5,000 every Sunday for group meditation. Like I've heard it's under 1,000 on a regular Sunday in Kana. They have that big meditation hall, and there's only 1,000 people, and it's empty. But the mission, they have all these paid programs, right? But those paid programs are not going to fill the ashram. These wellness things they're doing. And so, yeah, they'll make direct money from that, and they're making maybe some money from Brighter Mind scam. But in terms of the ashram itself, it was built for big gatherings, and Chargy's ashram had outgrown the meditation hall was only holding 5,000-6,000 people. Maybe 7 if they packed everybody in there tight, right? And so they had to have these venues in Tirupur and then Tiruvallur where they could seat 100,000, 80,000 people, even 30,000 at a gathering. And so the Chargy had upwards of 80,000 on one of his birthdays. I mean, just so many people. And Dodgy just they have dwindling numbers and dwindling enthusiasm. And so again, I'm not in contact with anybody. I don't get any of this information unless people send it to me. But there's zero reason to limit to 20,000, because if you can't handle more than 20,000, then the ashram's a complete failure, right? And when you're hurting for money, when they're hemorrhaging money, and they have all these scams and business deals and things going on there, apartment scams and just a scam after scam and real estate scams, these things. And when you have all those things, you've built this city there. I mean, it's 1,000 acres, and there's all these people living there in apartments and nice houses, and you've had all this. I mean, I don't know how big the ashram is, but there's at least 500 acres and private residence available. So just all the people having apartments, having temporary apartments, foreigners buying, apartments there. All those things, if those things are filled, it's probably a good 30,000 people right there just for that, for the gathering alone. And so if they're limited to 20,000, it's just so they can say that's why there's only 20,000 people here. It's not because Dodgy can't, generate more. Or more want to come, we just turned them away, right? I mean, that could be the only reason. Unless the infrastructure can't handle but they already had more people. They didn't say they weren't limited for that gathering where they had, I won't call it a gathering, but that festival they had with all the other spiritual organizations. I mean, they've had, when we were there, they were supposed to have 70,000 people, and they just had opened. And, the toilets were backed up. There were some issues, right? It wasn't like the best situation. But it handled the 70,000 people for three different, whatever it was, right? I mean, the meditation hall was almost full, and all the auxiliary buildings were full. And so it was almost at full capacity. And, they had the president of India. I mean, they had all these things there. And so, it's just silly because they have all this merch to sell and, all the donations that come in. That's the way that they make the money. The gatherings it's like having a concert, right? you make a lot of money when a lot of people donate money. If you have 100,000 people and they all donate $3 or more, $5, you make $500,000, right there. So like 4 times a year, that's $2 million a year. And you have all that money to put into the infrastructure and all these things, right? And then all these other scams and things he's doing. But anyways, they're just liars. So, I thought they might do two. They might do two, because Chargy only had 4 sittings. Like they limited to 4 sittings, and like all that stuff, right? And then Dodgy will have at least probably 6, and he just always is under. It's all about Chargy. Like he's always competing with him, which there's no competition. You already lost, bro. You had no chance. Like there was no chance anyone was going to think. Anybody who saw the two of you would think that you're on the same level as him in any capacity. He was better at everything than you were, right? So, to continue on with what I was saying last night, the yesterday, seeing seeing myself in the, in the video, and like having this, almost a disconnect between myself back then. It's like if I saw that person, we're the same person, but we're not, right? There's that great movie called Loopers, right? That kid who grew up from 30 Rock, and Bruce Willis comes back as, him as an adult from the future, and he's telling his younger self how stupid and what a dummy he is and these things, right? And like, they're two different people, right? They're two different people sitting at a diner having a conversation, but having this kind of sense that I'm better than, I was better than that. I think about myself, right? Like I just, look like a spiritual person, right? Like if I was just seeing some person, and reading their condition, I would, evaluate that person spiritually more than I think about it, because, just being a slacker or whatever, just not, all of it, right? All these things, and I feel like I could be doing more. Like I just, there's more in me. Like I've been gifted with more spiritual abilities and stuff that, using here. And I don't want to say but, as a conduit or whatever, that I could, be more present and, but I don't know how to do any of those things. So I haven't been taught, Babaji connected directly, but I'm not someone who intercommunes. I don't get spoken to by, the thing that I'm going on is very vague, a dream that Chargy said you're a preceptor again. Because I was a preceptor, then I wasn't a preceptor, then I had a dream and, I started doing these things, these sittings. I would like to get the old preceptor books and reread those, and, but I can't find a way to get those. I had those, but my ex never sent my copies to me. And so, those books are lost that I had. I also had the tapes that are lost, and I can't find any used ones on the internet. The ones that Dodgy's putting out are just crappy. DeChargy's old preceptor seminar from 1989 and 1990. And it'd have to come from somebody who's either left the mission or died, and if kids are selling the books and they end up on eBay or something, and I can't find them. Like it's just, and it's just, I contacted Fred, my preceptor Fred's, because I think he quit being a preceptor, and I think he had some mental issues. He might even be dead. And I contacted his ex-wife, who I know a little bit. She didn't get back to me. So I've done what I can to try to find these books, but I'm limited because I'm not in contact with any of these people, and so whatever. Like someone who didn't want the book, or I pay above, market value for it just to, whatever it is, but I can't find it, and it's just, I don't know if any of them will end up in like the eBay type situation at some point, but I've looked consistently, and it's not just the book; it's the whole thing, right? Like it's just not having somebody there, like a master overseeing the things, right? Just on a spiritual level, certainly from the etheric world, yes, but not a living master. But then I thought about this. This was the other piece to this, and this, speaks to what happened with Dodgy. That, I've been doing this, talking about Sahaj Marg, and, it's a little bit, it was for some period of time, Heartfulness, since 2014. And there's a period where I felt like, all right, the clock's ticking. I got to just, really talk about it. as like, this is the solution. And, I mean, this is all I know. Anybody who respects my opinion or my, whatever I have here, this is important. Like just, not that I don't recommend things like, especially this, because people have to come to it on their own, but just, I was talking about it every video because I thought this is, an opportunity, the door's closing. And I looked at the Gratefullness meditation channel, and, the average sitting video, I'll look at it right now, gets, last one got 113 views, 119 views. This is, 145 views. And so the weekly meditations are getting, the Chargy Gathering got 219 the first day, the second day 96, and the third day 127. So, maybe 200 people were doing it. But the individual sitting, one here got, a couple got 200 views on July 17th and July 10th. And so, between 1 and 200 people are doing the individual sitting, which is great, right? When I started in 1993, there was about 400 good, solid American, non-Indian Abhyasis. And that number stayed pretty consistent, like 500 maybe, total. Like it's a lot of people. I was thinking because I get about 5,000 views on my videos. And, I think that's a very low number. Like there's videos I had that got 2 million views, right? But on a regular video now, it's some of them are up to 6,000, 7,000. I'm getting more views. But even when they were down to 4, like I know what 3,000 to 5,000 people look like because every Sunday in Chennai there was 3,000 to 5,000 people. That's a lot of people, right? If there's, if I was giving us, because I was doing a comedy show or something, that at a small stadium, one of those concert halls, small concert halls or something, that said 5,000 people, I'd be overwhelmed by the amount of people there, right? And so on my regular channel, I get 5,000 people listening to me pretty much every other day, whatever it is, when I release a video. When there was 1,000 people at the gatherings in Molina, Georgia, it was quite a number, and then 20,000, 30,000 people. It's a lot of people, right? The gathering 2020 that had 70,000 people, that was, quite extraordinary, the amount of people that's there, right? But in terms of America, there was been about 400, 500 people who were, American, grew up in America, not Indian, Abhyasis. And just the Gratefulness meditation, we have probably like 100 or more who are doing this practice, right? Which is, 1/4 of that just from my YouTube channel, right? And my YouTube channels. And maybe 1,000 people started from, like, tried Sahaj Marg or Heartfulness because they heard it from me, like maybe 1,000 or more, like, let's say 2,000, like be generous. I mean, I don't know how many, I mean, it's definitely it's probably under 1,000, but, but let's say tops 5,000. And all those people, there's now about 100 or so, 200 or so people who regularly do the meditation. Some, are not, maybe do their practice, meditate every day, maybe do their cleaning. Again, they're not being trained by a preceptor. They just have the info I leave on my, on my channels, right? And I get about 3 or 4 comments every time I release a sitting on Tuesdays, right? And so, I've had 100 some odd million views on my videos. And of all those people, 100 million people, whatever it is, because some of them are repetitive views. But let's say there's 50 million different people that have seen my videos, like even 20 million, right? Even a million. But like it's probably, 50 million, let's say. And out of that 50 million, 30 million people heard about Sahaj Marg in some capacity. And out of those people, 1,000 or so have done the meditation. And out of those 1,000, 100 to 200 have stuck with it, right? And so, the thing about Sahaj Marg is if your soul chose to do it, you'll find your way. If your soul knows about it and it's chose to do this, you'll find a way to do it. You'll find a way to connect to it. And it's not that many people. Like they say there's hundreds of thousands, but I'm talking about like the real, people like me who were like, oh, this is my thing. This is it, right? It had some profound experience. And this was like, you see how like your whole destiny, your whole life's path, everything that happened in my 29 years of life, led me to that moment to go to this guy Fred's house and get these sittings. Like it was, it was the turning point in my life, right? It was the difference maker. Everything that's happened since then, the transformation I've gone through is because of that, this big, this big moment where my first three sittings that I received, right? And how profound they were, and the big experience that I have, right? And that every gathering that you go to, you don't think you're going to go to a gathering, or you don't think you don't have the money, you don't have the time off, and something happens and you end up there. Like every one of these spiritual things that I've been a part of, and how there was that whatever went into me going, and the way that it ended up, and all these things. The one in 2020, which was imperative to me to see what was going on with the mission, and right before COVID and these things, right? Because without going to that, I would have limited information. Like it was, just all the stuff with Diaper Baba and all the things that were going on there. It helps me see the issues with Dodgy, and open my eyes to, something that I thought was impossible, that a master of the system could fall like he's fallen, right? But, there are people like in basketball, they call it being one of those ones, which is a generational talent or player. And there's people in the mission who are like that. Like they're, people have contributed, and they're just, this is, they're devoted to this system. And maybe there's 5,000 of those people, 10,000, they're not doing it just because they have to do something, right? Because I was not a person who was a spiritual seeker consciously. Like I was interested, had a curiosity about these things. And I had this time when I was really into, the Catholic religion, these prayer meetings my mom used to have when I was in like 8th grade. I was 12 years old, 12, 13 years old. I thought about God a lot. And then I, started using drugs when I turned 14, and I, didn't think about God at all till into my 20s. I started going to some of these new age spiritual things, partly because my girlfriend sort of dragged me to some of these things, and she saw a therapist that I ended up going to see, who was a medium and a channeler. And both of those people, the therapist and my ex-girlfriend, couldn't do Sahaj Marg. The therapist had started and tried it, and she felt the energy, but she rejected it, right? And my girlfriend just made fun of it, like even though she was, like she was kind of more new age person than I was. She liked to go to those new age stores with the crystals and things, this new age movement that was just starting to happen. But we had broken up at the time, and we talked, and she was kind of weirded out that I was doing this. And I talked to her, I mentioned, Babaji, I'd probably said Chargy as well. And she had a friend, a girl who used to burp and say Bobby Oba when she burped. So she called Babaji Bobby Oba, which was kind of disrespectful, So, it was what it was, right? But I'm saying that, my brother couldn't feel anything. And I don't know if he's quit now. The ashram, he's out at the ashram. The ashram is like closed. I don't know. But, he never felt anything, but he stuck in there because of, whatever things to do with me or him. I don't know why he's stuck. But the people who just, this is their calling, has always been very limited. And those people find it, right? They find it one way or another. There's this epic story about Babji saying there's one guy who comes in at point 4. And, that takes, it takes 45 years to go from point 1 to point 2. Then 45 years times 45 years to go to point 3. And then 45 years times that number. So it's like 10,000 years of spiritual experience. And, it's very hard for people to come in life after life and pick up where they left off. Like video games where, there's video games where you can save your progress. And then there's video games you got to make it from the beginning to the end when you're playing in one session, or you can't complete the game, right? And, your life is kind of like a combination of both those things. Like your progress is saved, but you don't start off, you start from the beginning each life. You're born as a little baby, and then you have your life, develop. And, maybe, if you have some spiritual tendencies, you'll probably have those, and, but you never know. You just have a bad life, or you get off track, and, you might have a good life, bunch of good lives, and you're building spiritual capital. Then you have a bad life, and that sets you in the wrong direction. So there's no guarantee of continued progress, right? But this guy comes in, Babaji started off at point 1, and he was Patanjali, and he was, Babaji. And Lalaji started off at point 1. And there had never been anybody who came in at point 2 or 3 or 4 or any of these points. So Babaji had one guy who comes in point 0.4. Babaji's blown away. And within 2 sittings, he could move him up to 0.6. The guy would have liberation. And Babaji lamented how the guy took 1 sitting and left and never came back, right? This guy who had spiritual capital from some previous life, and he couldn't do it, right? He couldn't sustain it. He couldn't keep it going. But the people who are chosen for Sahaj Marg, their soul has chosen it. They come, they find it. And, in terms of my YouTube channel, I don't know how many of the 200 people have been chosen for it, why they're doing it, why you're doing it if you're one of those people, listening to this. But, like it's limited. Like there's just not that many people. Like I need help to do what we're doing with Gratefullness meditation, and there's just no help available. And, the majority of Abhyasis, although they're chosen for this thing, to me, based on my limited information about each case-by-case basis, they're all failing, right? And so, I might have more capacity to move into, doing things, but, there's some things I can't do, and I won't do. I won't even try. It's just, doomed to failure. But even if I could put on a gathering and I was willing to, shoulder all the responsibility and all the workload and, make those gatherings happen with really no support or no help from people, no anything. There's no people to populate the gathering, right? Like out of these 200 people, I've said before how many people would go to a gathering if we had one, and like barely anybody responded, and so like if 1 or 2 people were willing to go, then, then there's no reason to do it, right? I'm not that one of those 2 people isn't, just a few people, it's great doing any kind of gathering, but that isn't even a group. Satsang is supposed to be 100 people. Like you should go to Sunday satsang every day, and there should be like 100 people, at least 20. So 100 people is nothing, and I don't know how committed people are to the system who found it, through this channel. But so in terms of like being people who are, really a part of this thing, it's a small number, right? And that's just what's available out there. Like this has been available, it's on the internet, right? And Charju is coming here every year, and only a handful of people would find it, and lots of those people would quit, right? And so the people who were supposed to find it would find it. Like, you would just find it. You would. Something would, the circumstances would unfold. Like it was part of a plan. And right now the plan is most people just can't do it or won't do it. And like I said, like I really wasn't, like I'm not I don't have this divine kind of, the desire to be a spiritual person, like on an egotistical level. These people who traveled to India in the 60s, and, some of them found, they all wanted to go on these spiritual journeys, like the Beatles and all these people. And they found that there was spirituality in India and this New Age practices. And all these people in the world, the New Age practices, there's millions upon millions of people doing some New Age shit out there. And only a handful of people find the real thing, like the best thing. That's Sahaj Marg, right? And they find there's some of the things are valid, some of the practices are valid. But in terms of spiritual benefit, the Sahaj Marg system is a clean vertical path to connect to the divinity within you, and nothing like it's ever existed, at least according to the system. It's just a one-pointed system to help you connect to divinity, and a fast track you into your spiritual yatra and things like this. And not that many people find it, even people who are spiritual seekers. Like they find something and they go on a spiritual journey, like they have a valid spiritual journey and something else. There's people who are doing religions, who do the religion really well and become spiritual, saintly people, higher developed souls. There's higher developed souls in all these different practices. Every religion has higher developed souls and saints. Every spiritual practice has higher developed souls and saints. But those people, would best benefit from Sahaj Marg. It's not for them. They can't find it. They don't have a connection to it, right? At least for now. And I don't know in some dystopian future if that'll change, and hopefully it will. But it's very limited, right? Like think about the trends, like how many people have a cell phone, or how many people have watched, watch YouTube every day, or go on social media. How many people watch the Kardashians and, just the crap out there, right? I've watched a lot of shows, and I want to talk about this on my other channel today. I want to wrap this one up. But I've watched a lot of shows that talk about the brutality and the way human beings will torture other human beings. This thing, one of them is about the the Vikings I've seen, stuff to do with ancient England, the Mongols and Genghis Khan. I see various shows, fictional shows that are, describe that period and the horrific things that people will do to each other, right? Binding young girls' feet. I mean, you can see the pictures of what those feet look like where they break the bone of the foot and the arch of the foot and make it's despicable stuff, crazy stuff, traditions, human sacrifice. I mean, look at all the torture devices that human beings have invented to torture other people, right? The way they've killed people. Think about all the things that have been done in the past in terms of the way the Christians were sacrificed, right? Like all the disciples, there was the crucifixion, which was brutal, right? And then there's all these things that were even like as bad or worse that these disciples, I mean, just horrible ways of killing people, keeping them alive and torturing them, right? I mean, this is what human beings engage in. And there's only a handful of people that'll do Sahaj Marg, right? Engage in the solution. And, and that's where I'm at with it. Like I just, with all the time I've been here, I've had this YouTube channel, being popular now for over 10 years, right? The YouTube channel's been around since 2007, and it popped in 2014, the end of, the beginning of 2015. So this December will be the anniversary of my first video going viral, and then, getting 2 million views and my channel popping. And since that time, this has been a doorway to this solution. There's a door that people could find here and try Sahaj Marg, and they could, benefit from, feel the transmission and go, this is it. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And how many people have actually done that? Like, and I'm not criticizing the people because it's just what's meant to be, right? It's just limited. It's very limited. The amount of people who can do the system and are called to it is very limited. So I was watching this movie, and there's a priest who quoted from the book of Jeremiah from the Old Testament, right? And I've talked about the Old Testament as like just not spiritual at all. It's the opposite. It's like they're worshiping a demon, a narcissistic, sociopathic demon, posing as God. But it says, starting off here, the Jeremiah 13. This is what the Lord said to me. So apparently the Lord is talking to Jeremiah. So buy a linen belt and put it around your waist, but do not let it touch water. So I bought a belt as the Lord had directed and put it around my waist. Then the word of the Lord came to me a second time. Take the belt you brought and are wearing around your waist and go to Pereth and hide it in a crevice in the rocks. So I went and hid it in Pereth as the Lord told me. Many days later the Lord said to me, go now to Pereth and get the belt I told you to hide there. So I went to Pereth and dug up the belt and took it from the place where I had hidden it, but now it was ruined and completely useless. And so then he says, ruined, it was completely useless. Then the Lord came to me. This is what the Lord says. In the same time, I will ruin the pride of Judah and the pride of Jerusalem. These wicked people who refuse to listen to my words, who follow the stubbornness of their hearts and go after other gods to serve and worship them, will be like this belt, completely useless. For as a belt is bound around the waist, so I am bound to all the people of Israel and all the people of Judah to me, declares the Lord. To my people from my renown and praise, honor, but they have not listened. Say to them, this is what the Lord say, the God saith. And this is the part that coming to this. Every wineskin should be filled with wine, and say to you, don't we know that every wineskin should be filled with wine? Then tell them, this is what the Lord saith, I am going to fill with drunkenness all those who live in this land, including the kings who sit on David's throne, and the priests, the prophets of these living in Jerusalem. I will smash them, this is the part, I will smash them against the other, parents and children alike, declares the Lord. I will allow no pity or mercy or compassion to keep me from destroying them. And so he's destroying all these people who are not worshiping him. Like this is his attitude. So when the Jews were in exile, apparently, there's this time, if you've seen the Ten Commandments movie, where they're building false idols and returning to their previous pagan worship, and the God's not happy with it, their God. And he wants to destroy them and smash them, children and adults and all these things, because they had the audacity to not worship him, the one true God. He wasn't going to let compassion or mercy stop them. These are just, it sounds like a bad person who's like, this is what Trump would do, right? Sounds like Trump, right? When the people turn on him or they don't love him and he gets all jealous and, hurt in these things and whatever. And any bad leader, any dictator, any sort of dictator in person, right? But people would rather have this shit. People would rather have this fucking shit. This, this, remember with David, David was ordered, to go out and get 100 foreskins from I think it was the Canaanites, right? Like God, ordered him, or the king ordered him to get, David was the chosen one from God. And the king, he wanted to get the king's daughter hand in marriage, whoever the king was, he needed to get 100 foreskins, and David went out and got 200. So he cut the foreskins off of 200 dead soldiers. Like, he pulled their pants down, and he circumcised dead Canaanites and brought it back to the king so he could get married as a dowry. Like, that's, this is the kind of crap that people are, the human sacrifice, the animal sacrifice, the, God being a prick and a narcissist and petty and, it's not even a religion. It's not even anything to do with divinity. The Old Testament, and then, the New Testament is remedial in its way, too. It's much better than the Old Testament. But, if you understand this, what the fuck? WTF, right? Like, this is what we're dealing with. And this is what people will gravitate to. And then people don't even want this. Like, people just want to, if you looked at what happened at the Democratic National Convention and things, it's a demon fest, right? It's a freak show. And people, billions of people are doing something of a low nature. And a handful of people are looking for God internally and find it in some capacity. And then a very small percentage of those people find Sahaj Marg. But there's chosen people for it, and those people have either found it now or they're going to find it in the future. And it's not that many people. Like, I don't know. Like, maybe at some point there'll be a bumper crop. We'll see. But right now that isn't the case, right? People who see it, feel it, get it, and, want to do it. And, I've seen it over and over again. My people, I thought might get it, or people, who, people are my friends, whatever, relatives, whatever it might be, right? I know my kids would do it, all these things. And it wasn't for them, right? It just wasn't. And it's, it was used to bum me out, but now I just accepted it because it's reality. And you can't force something that isn't there. There's a connection that has to be there, and most people don't have it, or they're too gross to recognize it and actualize it. But either way, it's a very small number of people. So I'm going to wrap this one up here, and then I'll continue on, whatever. Okay, so I want to talk about evil. I'm very aware of it, like just being up after watching the Democratic National Convention, and then just, I've had this, there's going to be like two complimentary voiceovers that are going to go up on my Gratefullness meditation channel and probably my backup channel that will be also a part of the Journey series. That's right now just for members because it just, I'm putting out too much content and other reasons. But anyways, so there's things that are going on in my personal life, not so much to do with me and, my, direct situation, with my wife and my son or whatever. But my wife's got a relative who got turbo cancer. Somebody who's a, very liberal Democrat and who, my wife tried to talk to about, these things. And that person's got turbo cancer. They had, they had cancer in remission, and then they, they were very enthusiastically getting the poop, and the roosters, right? And got turbo cancer, is dying poorly, right? Like cancer in the brain, cancer in the lungs and lymph nodes, right? Just the whole thing. And, it was going through the death process and just not doing well at it. And I'm not going to talk more about that, but, so that was going on. And then we got news yesterday something that's kind of even worse that we're dealing with. Again, to do with, my wife's family. And so, there are things like that that are like everybody's going through, right? There's just stuff like that because we're living in a time where things are coming to the surface. And, I've never watched a convention like I watched the Democratic convention. And even afterwards, somehow I was watching like one of the news is CNN or MSNBC. And Michelle Obama came out and just absolutely lied about Trump in some bizarre narrative, right? And they were applauding her for giving a good speech. I'm like, this is a horrible speech. And, she's, odd. I mean, she's got huge, long arms and, the masculine features and all those things. And, it was just like a debauchathon over there, like a freak show over there at the DNC. And I really, covered it more intensely because of this thing that happened where Kamala Harris is getting elected with no votes and the way that the DNC manipulated all these things, right? And, I was thinking about this in terms of like, it just seems like everything's like really evil. Just like their evil is just more prevalent. It's just really up. And, I want to talk about this because most people have a childish and primitive view of evil because of a system has wanted it that way. So the way that most people, well, all of us get introduced to the idea of good and evil is that there's a hero, and that hero is 100% good. And there is a villain, and that villain is 100% evil. And when you watch a movie, most people identify with the hero. And they frame the narrative so that you're connecting with the hero and you're rooting for the hero to succeed. And, you can watch a movie where two historical figures are in an adversarial. You can just watch two movies where two historical figures, let's say it was like Edison and Tesla. And Tesla, there's a movie recently about this, the current war, something like that, the current war or something. And, Tesla was cast as the protagonist. And Edison was cast as the villain, which is kind of the narrative that's out there, right? Which electricity, AC, alternating current, or direct current was going to be used. And they went with the bad one, right? Like, so there's been these wars like Beta versus VHS in terms of the videotape, something like this. But then they could make another movie where Edison is the hero and Tesla is the villain, right? I saw a video, two movies. One was done by Germany, and the other one was done by America. And it was about the Rothschilds family. One was done by Hollywood, which favored the Rothschilds family. You can watch these movies. I really got a lot out of them. The other one is a German movie that the Rothschilds were evil. And in the Hollywood version, the big story is how the Rothschilds came to power. They were bankrolling, like there was Rothschilds banks. They had brothers. These brothers each had a bank. One was in France, and one was in Germany, and one was in England, and then there were two other banks somewhere else. I forget what. And the one that was in England was bankrolling the English war. This guy who became this was the primary Rothschilds bank, and the other one was bankrolling the French in the French war. There was a war between the English and the French, and they were both Napoleon, and they were both the Rothschilds were making that happen, and so the French battled the English, and the English won, but the news came back to England that France had won, right? And in the American version, Rothschilds didn't know this was fake. And so the British government's stocks plummeted, right? Not their stocks, their bonds. Like governments issue bonds, and their bonds became worthless. And Rothschilds, being the patriot he was and loving England so much, he bought up all the bonds, right? Which makes no sense. Like, it just doesn't. This is how he became the richest man in the world. But in the other version, he had word that England had actually won. And either he sent out disinformation that France had won, or somehow it came back that France had won, but he knew England had won, and he bought up all these bonds for next to nothing, and then he owned the English government after that because he had majority stockhold, just majority stake in the in the government in terms of these bonds, and he became of course a knight and the richest man in the world. He became the first billionaire because of that, right? This family. And it was two different ways of looking at it. One where he was portrayed as a hero, and the other where he's portrayed as a villain. And when you watch movies, you get sucked in because your mind is in the passive alpha mode, and you just get sucked into the narrative, and they can, warp any. I mean, they have serial killers now that are the protagonists, right? They show Dexter and these other movies and things. I mean, they have the worst people, where they made Maleficent a hero. They started to do this with Disney movies. Well, all of a sudden, Maleficent, who was a villain in, I guess, what is it, Sleeping Beauty or one of those other movies, was now the hero. And they made two of these, right? And, there was a story, Angelina Jolie came out. She had always wanted to be like in a Disney kind of movie. And she came out as Maleficent with all these little kids thinking that they were going to like her because she was the hero in the movie. And when they saw her, because she's dressed up like freaking Baphomet, they just were repelled. These kids were naturally like, she's evil. Like, you look at her, she's evil. Like, that's what what evil looks like, right? And she thought she would be, like one of these Disney princesses or something. The kids were, like running for the hills, right? But that's how they can warp these narratives. And I've watched a number of various, like, historical shows on Netflix and some of these other networks that are very graphic in nature. I just watched this thing, Marco Polo. It's very graphic. And it's, and the horrors that these people do to other, the historical horrors, it's about the Khan, the guy who's the ancestor of Genghis Khan, and he's a horrible person. They're all horrible, right? And they're all doing evil. Like, both sides are both evil. Like, you can't say there's anybody to root for because they're just all, like, they're disregard for human life and torturing people. They're breaking the feet of these young girls that use this Chinese tradition to break the arches so that the ball of the foot meets the heel and some kind of deforming them. Of course we know about like genital mutilation. I mean, there's just ways that people have of torturing their kids and torturing people, enslaving people, and just like these torture devices. I've watched the Vikings, and my wife and I just watched this another version of King Arthur and some of these other things, and it's just the torture that people do. Burning people alive, like all these horrible things, right? And just bad stuff, right? And like things that are like abominations, and that's gone on forever. There's 28 million like legitimate slaves, people who are owned in the world right now. 28 million, like that's a lot of people, right? And there's other forms of slavery that's more prevalent, of course, wage slavery, but just all the deviant and evil things and people's predisposition to doing twisted, horrific things to other people or the environment, building weapons of mass destruction. And, there's just an evil nature that exists in people. There's also good, but then there's evil. And there's never one situation where there's good people and bad people, because that's part of the problem, is that people who are themselves evil think they're good and that they're the good guys, and the people that they're against are the bad guys and the evil ones, and they deserve to be punished. And so they justify their evil because of the other people's evil. Because the nature of evil is, it's not your body, right? So if you think about God and love and good and evil and the positive qualities and the negative qualities, when your body dies, all that stuff leaves it. People go, I'm going to go piss on his grave or dance on his grave or whatever. But the reality is, the part of the person that you're mad at, whatever person, their life force. I talked about when I was 10 years old and I saw my grandfather's corpse, at his funeral, and he wasn't there. I was like, that's not him. They put lipstick on this guy who was like a, old school tough guy, fought in a couple wars and, all this stuff. But I was like, that ain't him. He's gone. Like, that's just, that's a shell. Like, he's shedding his his shell, his whatever it was. And, I couldn't articulate it because I was a 10-year-old kid, but, everything that you are goes with you. And this is the idea of samskaras, which is by far the best explanation, impressions that you take with you that have energetic, element. It's like storage. It's like, your etheric soul has a storage of your life, right? And your decisions go with you, and your addictions and your good things and your bad things. And, the next life that you live, that stuff's coming back with you when you incarnate back in your physical body. The stuff that you leave with when you die, your impressions, all the things that, the things that you're accountable for, the debts you owe, the things that you've done that you need to resolve, any issues, addictions. If you die an addict, you'll be born and you'll have a life that's going to lead you to addiction because you didn't master that. You didn't overcome that. You didn't process it, right? Like, you have to do something about it. If you commit suicide, then your next life you have a prevalence of, you'll have a life that will lead you to wanting to commit suicide again, right? And so these patterns of behavior are with you and you're taking them with you. And so everything's accounted for. And anger and fear and paranoia and, love and hate and, all these things, right? Happiness and joy and, all the things that you would experience as a person and the things that you were, focused on, the things that, dominated your personality, they're going to come back with you, right? And they're going to form something. Like there's going to be, your soul's going to plan something, is going to have some, masterful plan on how to deal with these things and process them and come back to a pure state, come back to a state where, all these things, it's like things that you take with you with a video game, right? Like you're in a video game and you die, right? Like your avatar dies and you come back and you have a new life. In that new life, you still have the knowledge and experience that you've gone through the various levels of the video game, and whatever things that you've brought with you, whatever assets and things that you've accumulated, and of course deficits as well in terms of your soul. These video games where you have weapons, like say that you bought, you earned these things, and then you die and you still have these things when you come back, right? These potential assets to help you win the game, and so that's like a remedial version of real life and how it works. And so evil exists inside people, whatever that is, right? All these things exist. And, evil, good, evil, love, hate, these things that are there, right? All the things that are, part of your internal makeup. And it isn't your body. It's in your physical body. And it relates to your ego, obviously, and not your soul, because you have your ego and your soul. And your ego is where all these human type of emotions and the lower level emotions like love and compassion and empathy and divinity that's there within your soul are the pure higher things, and they're associated with your heart. And the lower level emotions are associated with your gut, and of course your mind is cunning, and your mind is strategizing in these things, and is it has to be influenced by one or the other. So if you are somebody who is focused on the lower level of tendencies of, fear and anger and lust and, all the negative, like things that people consider the sinful things, your appetites, right? Pleasure and, all these things, addiction, which are associated with your gut and your impulsivity, right? And immaturity that's there. And that's why you feel all these things in your gut level in terms of your expression on your physical body. And then your soul resides in your heart, also where all this stuff is accumulated in terms of your actions and things. But anyways, this stuff all resides in you etherically. And I talked about this in my book. I had written a workbook, and it was Transforming Abuse, right? A soul-driven existence. And, because I worked with this in terms of being a counselor, a clinician in treatment centers with sex offenders and, all these types of things, the assault cycle. And, I came to understand that it's like a computer virus or a physical virus. Evil is injected into people in trauma, right? And so, like you take something like physical abuse or sexual abuse or emotional abuse or these things where people mistreat other people. And a person who has been abused themselves and has been injected with some sort of evil virus then does it to somebody else, like a sex offender has been sexually offended and has had some sort of sexual abuse, and they have this virus in them, and then they offend other people, other kids, whatever it is, right? And then those people now have that virus, and there's a thing called the trauma outcome process, right? There's a few things that we use to look at this. There's one thing called the assault cycle, which was a series of steps a sexual offender would go through before offending. It always started with victim statement, and this could be applied to any wrongdoing, criminal behavior, where you have a poor me, a victim statement, where you feel like you've been wronged. Criminals and people who indulge in the most evil are always victims, and they're abusers because they're victims, right? Because they have an abuser and a victim inside of them. They've been victimized, but now they also have the experience of the abuser. You had an abuser in your life, and you've internalized that person, right? And whatever that is, it could be like a tyrant, right? Like a governmental tyrant, and abuses the people, and all those people internalize that abuse. And then the soldiers, the foot soldiers, and the minions that do all the evil bidding for the abusive person who leads the country, a demonic king, and the whole country suffers from abuse and trauma and things, and other countries are invaded, and the horrors of war, right? When talking about these ancient, civilizations, but it happens in, war. There's a movie called, there's a movie about a tank called Fury. And there's like all this evil stuff these guys, American soldiers, are doing. The sort of raping and pillaging that happens in these, in wartime, right? The war has been described as the absence of God, right? Where evil exists. My brother went to Vietnam, and he told me all these stories of things that he experienced, and then he became a counselor for veterans in the late 90s. And he told me these stories that these veterans were traumatized with. They were living with these things that they had seen, and some of the things, I mean, like they're, I would say just the story itself is traumatizing. That people would do these kind of behaviors, right? The vets themselves, or things they witnessed their fellow soldiers doing, and things that the people there were doing. And these countries that are, I mean, we haven't experienced being invaded yet. But when we do, and you see the kind of depravity that slips in, and evil sweeps through these countries, right? And it's just people, the worst kind of behaviors that exist inside people come out. And they're all inside of you. That's the thing. They're inside, they're internalized things, right? And so when somebody gets abused by somebody, the abuser injects this evil virus into them, or whatever it is, right? Not just abuse, any of these things. When evil is done to you by somebody, it's like it's injected into your system, and now it's part of your ego. And how do you cope with it? This trauma outcome process I talked about. And you can like hurt yourself, like if you've been abused. So you can pay the evil forward and abuse somebody else. You can cope with it, or you can hurt yourself, right? Like you can hurt yourself, and hurting yourself or hurting somebody else is like, you think, well, hurting yourself is somehow better. Well, but that in itself becomes something, right? I lived with this with my ex, who was constantly threatening suicide and, cutting herself and things like this. And it became, traumatic for all of us, my kids and me and the family, because she wasn't able to cope with her, her victim consciousness from her parental abuse and things that she had suffered, right? The only healthy solution is to find a way to get rid of the energetic abuse, which I, dealt with in this workbook, which, I'm never going to, I would have to go back and rewrite the whole thing. But I knew quite a bit about it, and, it has to do with the Sahaj Marg method of meditation, the cleaning. But how do you deal with trauma that happens to you when you get evil injected into your system? And we all are getting that every day, because it's in our media, it's in our world. We have our, everything that's so demonic and degraded, and people want to look at it like the right wing people want to look at it like it's just coming from the left, because they're the good guys, and you've been programmed to believe that you're a Christian and you're a right wing person and you're a good guy, and the liberals are the bad guys. But when the Christians dominated this country, the Christians have done a lot of evil, the Crusades and all the other things, right? They had armies, and the armies did bad things, and the religions themselves did bad things, torturing people, sexual abuse, all this stuff. Like these religions have been bad because they've corrupted and they've gone to an egotistical, evil dark side, and the governments that support them. And so there's no good guys here, right? It's how you personally deal with evil, and then people collectively, because you're going to come across evil in your life, and it's going to be done to you. It's going to be injected into your system, and it's going to take the form of hatred and anger and fear and whatever it might be. And then how do you process that? How do you not engage in those behaviors and justify those behaviors because the other people are evil, right? That you have to die, you have to fight fire with fire, you got to fight evil with evil, and you got to do evil things to the evil people, right? And that becomes, where you become evil and you don't even realize it because you've kind of outsourced your connection to it. Like the evil now exists in you. What do you do with it? Like how do you get rid of it? Like all this evil now that's being, all the evil things that we are doing that we don't even know about as a country. All the evil things that are being doing to keep your lifestyle going by the intelligence community and by the government and the army, the military industrial complex, the corporations, and all this evil shit that's being done to prop up a system that's demonic and ego driven and disconnected from the divine essence that has manifested the universe, right? And so we all are suffering consequences from the evil system falling apart and the evil coming to the surface. And it isn't like something where you're like, oh, Kamala Harris is the evil one or the Democrats are the evil one, Trump's the hero. It's not, not only is that not the case, but it doesn't work that way, right? It's like the whole system. It's the deep state. No, the whole system is demonic in nature. I came across this, I was watching this TV show. There was this, let me find it here. There was this, this monk for this one of these Mongolian Khans had become a monk, and he reads this part of Jeremiah 13. Now, the Jeremiah 13, which is part of the Old Testament, which I've talked about, is just a horrible book because of the way it portrays God, right? But the Jeremiah his book is intended as a message to the Jews in exile in Babylon, explain the disaster of exile of God's response to Israel's pagan worship. The people, says Jeremiah, are like unfaithful wife and rebellious children. Their infidelity and rebelliousness made judgment inevitable, although restoration and new covenant are foreshadowed. And so this is about God being petty and jealous, what they're calling God, and it isn't God. But God being petty and jealous because these guys who, they're exiled because of Moses, the exile that they're wandering around the desert. Where, I've heard another explanation of this is that there were these demons that were connected to this tribe in the desert, and they were weaponized by this demonic energy that they thought was God, right? Which is a valid narrative that makes sense in how things played out. But it says this is what the Lord said to me. Go and buy a linen belt and put it around your waist, but do not let it touch water. So I bought the belt as the Lord directed, and I put it around my waist. Then the word of God came to me a second time. Take the belt you bought and you are wearing around your waist and go to Perith and hide it there in a crevice in the rocks. So I went and hid it at Perith as the Lord told me. Many days later, the Lord said to me, go now to Perith and get the belt I told you to hide. So I went to Perith and dug up the belt and took it from the place where I had hidden it, but now it was ruined and completely useless. Then the word of the Lord came to me. This is what the Lord said. It's the same way I ruined the pride of Judah and the great pride of Jerusalem, the wicked people who refuse to listen to my words, who follow stubbornness of their hearts and go after other gods to serve and worship for them, were like the belt, completely useless. For as the belt is around the waist, so bounded all the people of Israel and all the people of Judah to me, declares the Lord. To my people to be my people for my renown and praise and honor, but they have not listened. Say to them, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Every wineskin should be filled with wine. If they say to you, Don't we know that every wineskin should be filled with wine? Then tell them, this is what the Lord says. I am going to fill I am going to fill with drunkenness all who live in this land, including the kings who sit on David's throne, the priests, the prophets, and all those living in Jerusalem. And this is the thing the guy read in the TV show, or he recited. I will smash them one against the other, parents and children alike, declares the Lord. I will allow no pity or mercy or compassion to keep me from destroying them, right? So the God of Israel, the God in the Old Testament, is a violent, petty, narcissistic, whiny little egotistical prick who is jealous and is constantly wrathful towards the people who, won't worship him. And that's not what God is, because God is in everything, right? The New Testament is a little bit better, but this is the foundation of the book. And this idea that you're evil and bad and you guys just can't rise up to God is true, all of us, right? That there's some element, some, darkness in humanity that we keep on going to the lowest common denominator. Like even saints. There's a long history of saints, including Jesus, who rose up to high levels of spirituality and then had some kind of spiritual fall. The planet is so, easily compromises people and takes them away from their soul's path. People get lured away in whatever pleasure-based, power-based, whatever it might be. And saints and spiritual people, this happens quite often. It's, sad and it's part of what we are. But we do have divinity within us, right? And it's ultimately God's, we're God's creations. And whatever abomination that we've become, that was a possibility within God's manifested universe. Like this is, victim consciousness and evil and all these things that exist, hatred and things. They were human creations, but we're all God's creations to start with. Everybody's a child of God. Every soul is, everything in creation has some sort of spiritual essence and energy, right? And God's system, the divine system, has contingencies to deal with depravity. And one thing is to wipe out the civilization, because it has to be. Like it's a cancer, like our civilization's a cancer, and it has to be wiped out. There's no other solution. Like there's good things here that we enjoy in our lifestyle and things that we like about, plane travel and car travel and air-conditioned rooms and, heated whatever it is, hot water and, cold, all these things that are available. Running water. I mean, there's a lot of great things in our civilization and things that we would have trouble living without. And so that's like the too big to fail part of, what I talk about this quite often. We're addicted to a system, 100% addicted to a system that's evil and taking people in the wrong direction because it's not based in divine will and principles, the debt-based economic system and the hedonistic, materialistic focused, right? Because there's nothing in your system. I mean, when have you heard that divinity is within you? God is inside of you. God has to be. By every definition, by every religion, if God created you, if God created the universe, I mean, your own, biblical tales, God created the universe in 7 days, which again is silly. Like there's no days there only days existed after the earth was created. But God created the heavens and the earth and all these things, right? The first part of Genesis. And if God created everything, then God created you. So there's divinity within you. And if you have a soul, that's, your divine essence. The nature of your soul is pure and divine. Your spiritual essence. And so if you have that in you, why are you not connecting with it? I've been working towards to connect with the divinity within me for over 30 years, and it's had transformational type of benefits. I mean, I've been transformed as a person because of that, because of the Sahaj Marg system that helps people connect with that, right? And so, I mean, it's a wonderful process, and it's there for everybody to experience. But why wouldn't you be told that? Why wouldn't your religion tell you that? Why wouldn't you be, aware of this at birth? Some cultures you are. In some cultures, they talk about the divinity within you, right? The namaste in Indian, the Indian culture, right? Pranams, where they, the divinity within me bows before the divinity within you, right? Recognizing that people have a soul and a spiritual essence. I mean, people think about their soul or know that they have a soul, but never think about it. Oh yeah, I have a soul, but what have you done to connect with it? Like you have an ego, right? Your ego's running wild, but your soul is just being neglected because of the nature of our our religion is remedial and demonic, and it's gone over to the dark side, and the majority the major religions have been compromised. They're not teaching this fundamental principle. I have this book, My Friend Within, that's for kids about finding divinity within you. Like it's it's a board book, right? Except I couldn't do it on a board book because I don't have the, it's on Amazon. But there's this element I talk about all the time, divinity within you. And I've had millions upon millions of viewers. Like I think with the deleted videos, I've deleted some videos that had millions or hundreds of thousands of views. I had a video that had 2 million views, and I had lots of videos that had either a million views or 800,000 views. Right? These were more commercialized type of Illuminati crap where I had a lot more sheeple coming to my channel. Right? And times have changed, of course, with YouTube. But I get on a regular basis, and I talk about this, I think, somewhere recently, over 5,000 views a day, right? In terms of my channel, the amount of views I'm getting, around 5,000 views. It doesn't seem like a lot given, people are watching, millions of people are watching, whatever it is, like some other channels or mainstream crap or whatever it is. But 5,000 people is a lot of people, right? And over the course of this channel, I've had like 150 million something views. And then my other channel has another 20, 30 million views on it. And then there are, deleted videos and things. And with all of that, how many people have gravitated to this idea of the divinity within them? And I talk about this more in my, my other channel, which I'm not going to, discuss here. I'm going to put this narrative in there anyway, so I don't want to get too redundant. But I had this, I've often thought about this, right? People will gravitate to my channel when I make Britney videos or celebrity videos. They like to see me mock Britney and, all these things. Mock politicians, if it's the right one. If I'm mocking Kamala, that's great. When I'm mocking Trump, they get butthurt or whatever, right? If I'm mocking Cardi B, it's good, but the ones who identify with Britney get mad at me. But, in general, it's the lower nature stuff, right? The stuff that I could get a lot more views if I just covered the Kardashians or whatever it is, right? Pop culture, Hollywood stuff. And I made my channel just about that. But the primary message that I have to deliver here about divinity within you and, my knowledge of that and all these things, the evil, battling these things, and the higher nature is, rejected by most people, whether it be from me or somebody else. Like if they can't hear it from me, they won't hear it from somebody else who talks about it in a different way, right? Like there are better Christian churches. There are better pastors. There are pastors who are, better at understanding divinity and have more of a spiritual aspect. The difference between religion and spirituality is religion said God is outside of you. You're a piece of shit and God's great. And maybe you'll get into heaven if God blesses you. I mean, this is this idea in Christianity, but these other religions, that you're a worthless piece of shit and there's nothing inside of you that's divine, and you're worthless. But if you worship God, then or you worship the God of the religion, then they'll give you a pass in the afterlife, a ticket to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, right? But that's this idea of God being in heaven somewhere, where spirituality is God's within you. And you have a better version of yourself that once you've, minimized your ego, you've dealt with your ego in some way, where your ego embraces the divine nature, then you can become something of a higher developed person and rise to a higher level of consciousness. And that's the highest, right? That's of the two things. There's this great saying from Master Charju, the third master of the system, that the lowest part of the higher, which is spiritual, is higher than the highest part of the lower. And you can become the most powerful person. You can become an emperor. You can become, a scholar, the best athlete, the best, the best actor, the best celebrity, the biggest celebrity, all these things. And you're still lower than a person who's just starting to, take their initial steps on the spiritual path, which very few people do. And that's the problem with humanity, right? People embrace the lower, which is where the evil incubates and the evil proliferates, and never become spiritual people, where they interact with the divinity within them, and they take responsibility for all the things in their lives as being for their good and coming from God. Even the evil stuff is coming from God. And that when you don't look at yourself as being a victim, but being somebody who is, is being handled and being managed and being, by your soul and by the divine sort of, spiritual support team, and that everything is accounted for, and there's nothing that's unfair, even though it appears unfair, that these things are for your benefit. And if you take them like as coming from God, as opposed to coming from, just random chance or, whatever it is, like some kind of, oh, why this happened to me, or why would God do this to me, to get pissed off at God. God, you suck. Why did you do this to me, right? Well, why did you do this in a past life? Why did you, why did you create this future for yourself, right? Like right now, you're creating your future by your decisions and your actions. Your past has created your present, and your present is creating your future. And so everything that's happening is based in your thoughts, your actions, and all these things. They're all affecting your future life and your future your current decisions and your attitudes and your what your thoughts are and your feelings and your emotions and all these things that you're indulging in. If you're indulging in hate and anger, then that's going to be part of your future. You're indulging in fear and paranoia, any number of things, right? All those things are creating your future, right? All your thoughts, all your emotions are manifesting your future right now. I talked about how, like, I had these hair clippers and I decided not to charge them, and I was setting myself up. I was screwing over, Tuesday Paul was screwing over Thursday Paul. Like, I'm doing something where then I have to clean up my mess from Tuesday. Like the person that made decisions on Tuesday is affecting me negatively on Thursday, right? Like, I'm very aware of these things, like doing something where I'm just kicking a problem down the road that a future future version of myself is going to have to deal with. My future Paul is going to have to deal with the problems current Paul is making for himself, right? I'm very conscious of these things on a day-to-day basis. So anyways, this is the nature of good and evil and all of it, right? That evil exists in every person. And what do you do with it? Like, how do you deal with it? And people don't know how to deal with it. Like, you've been injected with a virus, like a computer virus, and it's circulated inside your system, and it wants some form of expression. Like, the evil that's being, being projected out there in every aspect of our society, and the demonic nature of our society is a part of your ego, you're part of your psyche, you're part of your internal makeup, and it's looking to express itself. And how do you cope with it? How do you deal with it, right? And there's ways, I talk about the Gratefullness meditation, Sahaj Marg, the cleaning process, and, being aware of it and dealing with it, like dealing with it as a, being something that you have to deal with and not projecting it out like it's something outside of you. Your hatred, I talk about this, if you feel hatred, the object of your hate is, Joe Biden or Donald Trump or Kamala Harris or your ex or your spouse now or your one of your relatives or your parents or whatever, right? The person that you hate is the object of your hate, but the hate is inside of you. And that hate makes you feel bad. You have to get rid of it, right? Like, you have this resentment and hate inside of you. And if you indulge in it and, you feel like you're justified in hating somebody else, then that hate just consumes you. It consumes your internal world. And you see people like that in the truth community justifying their bad behaviors, their lies, their manipulations, their evil behaviors because they think that they're the good guys and they're fighting somebody who's bad and they get to use evil to defeat evil, right? But then you become evil. You see these revolutions where people depose the current leader, and the revolution always gets really bad. It gets worse than it was under the like I've said, this governments suck. Governments are horrible. But when you take down a government, it gets way worse. And you see that in all these countries, like Libya, like all these countries where there's regime change. You take down someone who's an evil dictator, then there's all these like junior dictators that your little wannabes that rise up gangs, and the vacuum, the power vacuum is filled by criminals, right, and sociopaths. So you take out one sociopath, and you give birth to hundreds of them, and everything falls apart. There's no rule of law. People say, all right, cops are horrible, police are horrible, militaries are horrible. Yeah, but you get rid of those, and then everybody just does whatever the fuck they want, and they express their evil, and then it just, everything falls apart. And that's going to happen here, and it's going to happen everywhere. When that evil system falls apart, if people don't embrace their higher nature, like it's this idea, when the deep state goes, that it'll be kumbaya and everyone will get along. No, people will be stealing from each other, killing each other. The system breaks down. You no longer have food in your grocery stores. People don't have any skills. They're mentally ill. They're, warped people. They're already making bad decisions with an oppressive system that is, keeping them in line. But there's no criminal justice system. There's no consequences for your actions. People will be murdering and, killing and doing all these things because there's no authority stopping them from doing it, right? There's no, as evil as the system is, as evil as and oppressive as the system is, it's helped keeping the evil nature in individuals down. And it only takes 10% of the people to go south, and that's going to create fear and panic, and all the evil that now is incubating inside of people is now released and manifesting itself, and that's what happens. Like it's happened throughout history, and it's a sad fact that human beings tend to go to the lower. They flirt with their higher nature from time to time. I mean, that's all of us. We flirt with our higher nature, but then the lower nature comes out, right, and it dominates, and it's just it's been a problem with humanity, and it has to stop. Like it's coming to a point where there has to be one way or another, where people have to rise up to a higher level collectively, or they have to just wipe humanity out and try something else. Like it's been a failed experiment. I've talked about this in various videos. But anyways, this is getting long. Okay, so today is Thursday, August 29th, and making this last voiceover. I'm going to put 4 voiceovers up on a separate video that's going up on Gratefulness Meditation and the backup channel. And then this will be the last video in the last audio in the 155th edition of the Journey series. A lot of drama going on, which I'm not going to share the details about, but not, with my direct family, but extended family. I talked about the cancer thing and, some of it, but it's just seems like a tumultuous time in the world. The election is just so bizarre, and I'm covering that extensively on my regular channel. And so this last voiceover, the dodgy truther sent me something. I just don't look at anything to do with heartfulness. Like I'm just over it completely. Like I feel much better not paying attention to it, but people send me stuff, and I'm going to report it just as give my take on things when it happens. But I haven't looked at the YouTube channel. I have no interest in it. I've been watching a long video of that, the heaven video of that was made by Guy Jaris and the people of, European. It's covered of charges, a European gathering in 2010, I think it is. And, I've been watching bits and pieces of it, just kind of, there's a little bit of a reminiscence thing here. And so Dodgy Truther sent me this, then I saw that I got an email on my backup channel. It's a different email address, and I haven't blocked it there just in case I, want to look at whatever's going on there. And so right after Kamlesh's birthday gathering that ends on September 29th, they're segueing into a yoga retreat, which is a paid yoga retreat, right? So if you're like a European or American or someone outside, Russian, whatever, there's these different population centers in these foreign countries where they'll come to a gathering, right? And that's a good time to come. Kamlesh actually has the best, I don't know what it's like in Kana, but weather-wise, it can be the monsoon season, so that sucks. It can rain a lot, so that's not great. But it's at least cooler there, right? But not. It actually gets pretty cold in Kana, like down to the 50s, 40s, where Chennai never got below 70. And so, it's, anyways, so people who travel from these foreign countries are at the ashram. So it's more than likely that they're going to do this yoga retreat, right? It segues right into it. So it says take 1 week yoga retreat with some guy, senior yoga teacher, to give you time and space to absorb what you received during the Mandara. And so this guy looks like I don't know what his relationship is to the mission, but he looks like he's like a regular yoga teacher, right? And isn't somebody who, like is an abhyasi, right? If that is like he does this as a main job, right? And so daily schedule 6 hours, and it's $100, 6,000 rupees, or $10,000 if you want food and accommodation in the yoga dormitory. Asana practice, chanting yoga sutras, pranayama, kriya, jaya meditation, and exploring kana. And so I think the meditation is not the Sahaj Marg meditation. It's associated with this type of yoga, right? Open to non-abhyasis, invite friends to enjoy this serene environment after the Bandara. And then it has Daji, who talks about how in reality at dawn, Babaji said, because we start in the Patanjali's yoga. So Patanjali's yoga, there are the 8 limbs of Patanjali's yoga. And the first limb is yama, which is ethical. There's these 5 yamas, which are nonviolence, truthfulness, non-stealing, these things, right? Nayama has to do with saying like being cleanliness, contentment. So these are like things that you do, like that you do to sort of prepare to be a yogic person, right? You get ethics and morality, and the other thing is sort of like work and being clean and things like that, right? Physical things. And then there's asana, which is covered in the hatha yoga, which is postures. Asana means postures. And so those are this is Patanjali was Babaji in a past life. Then there's pranayama, where you move your prana with breath. And Lalaji said to Babaji, in the time from my generation to your generation, people have become too weak to do pranayama. Lalaji was not doing Sahaj Marg the way it's done now. So he would prescribe things like pranayama, but he stopped doing it because it couldn't, people couldn't do it. They were just, they were degrading, right? And then there's pratyaharahara, I don't know. And this is, you're trying to you're detaching from the physical body and then moving into the etheric, right? So this is the step into that. And then there's concentration, which is number 6. Number 7 is meditation, and number 8 is samadhi, where you go into a deep state, right? A deep state of meditation, like you go inward and you're like you're like asleep but not asleep. And so what Daji was saying in this video, and I've seen this video clip before, is that Babaji said in reality at dawn that we started concentration in the Sahaj Marg method, and we get the other, but we have to absorb the other 5 limbs naturally. And it was understood by everyone because Babaji straight up said it in various places, and people talked to them about it, and Charji, that hatha yoga was not to be done. And some people did it, like they did it, they were already doing it before they came into Sahaj Marg for health benefits, and the hatha yoga, all the other 5 limbs of yoga, you were supposed to get naturally. You didn't have to do them. And one of the reasons is we have such a short period of time. So, when this was put out by Patanjali, people used to live a lot longer, like hundreds of years, thousands of years. Like this back in the Mahabharata, there's people lived a whole yuga, like 10,000 years. So like people lived really long lives, and people were completely different. Like there was, there was a level. Obviously, if they lived that long, And it was a different time. Like, it isn't the time of, this is the Kali Yuga where they're short lives and degraded human beings. And so there wasn't enough time to do all this stuff. Like, you could take years developing, these types of practices, mindfulness type of practices, and then you could meditate, but there was no transmission. There wasn't the method that's now given in Sahaj Marg. There was no yatra process. Samadhi was it. You'd go into a deep state of meditation. You'd go into you'd go inward, and samadhi is something that you can experience even in the first sitting. It's not the end goal, and that had to be understood by people. That Patanjali's yoga, that Babaji was Patanjali, and we came back. He came back with something else. He was gifted it. He went through it with Lalaji. But what Babaji offered as a method in Sahaj Marg was far superior. And these other limbs of Raja Yoga were just supposed to, of Stanga Yoga, were just supposed to be like natural things. Like, you were supposed to develop your own ethics, your own standards, your own character development, all these things. And asana in Sahaj Marg is just sit comfortably. Find a comfortable seat so your body doesn't interfere and pull you out of your meditation because you're going inwards. And it wasn't supposed to be like you went back after you started doing Sahaj Marg and started doing the other yoga. And that's what Daji's saying. It's a complete lie. And anybody who's read the literature and heard Charji talk about it, and people asked him, and he said, we're not supposed to do that. Because it interferes. It's a lower level of yoga, and it interferes with the higher level that's in the Sahaj Marg practice, right? Doing stretching, sure, if you need to do physical yogic stretches, but don't do the pranayama because that's not necessary. There was a time when Diaper Baba first came to the gathering in 2020, he was saying Pranhuiti pranayama. Pranhuiti is the transmission that's given. And he was saying it like they were the same thing. Pranhuiti pranayama. And after Daji had to kick the guy out, basically, because he was hijacking the whole gathering. And my brother was like coming up talking to me about like it's so weird, like he was, it was strange, and everybody for Europe and America was like, "Who is this guy? He's just weird." And Daji Kamlesh had to come out and say, "Yeah, of course there's a difference between pranayama and pranahuti, but when you bring people in who are, thinking their thing is similar or the same or better or whatever it is, right, and they're pushing their own thing, they're gonna try to hijack your stuff that you're doing, right? Because he had never heard of Pranhuti, no one had, and very few people had, and that's transmission that's given. Prana is the same thing, but you're moving your personal prana with your breath. And Lalaji said people were too weak to do that, so they shouldn't even do it. And of course, Babaji, he said, we're not even doing any of that stuff. And they made it clear, don't do it, right? Don't do any of these things, because it interferes with what you're doing in the Sahaj Marg system. And so for them to come in and say in this email that you're going to do, let me see what it says. Here it is, asana practice, chanting yoga sutras, that was totally not supposed to be done. Pranayama, which Lalaji said people are too weak to do. Jail Neti, which I don't know, is that Kriya Yoga, which is, I'm not sure what that is. Some form of meditation that, you've just been into a gathering, a bandara, and you're supposed to absorb what you received. And you keep on doing, regular. If you're at the ashram, you still go to satsang. There'll be a satsang twice a day or whatever it is, 3 times a day. It used to be in Charji's days. But instead of doing that, in the main hall, they'll be having something completely different. And Kamlesh is trying to say that he's trying to hijack and misinterpret. He's not trying to. He's misinterpreting Babaji's reality at dawn when it was clear by the other masters this wasn't supposed to be done. And all of us know it. Like, pretty much anybody who's read the books and heard the talks know that this was never part of it. Like, why wasn't it part of it before? And he's charging money. And so they bring all these people in, and then he gets these Europeans and, foreigners, Russians, people who are already at the ashram. And what are they going to do if the meditation hall is now being the regular Sahaj Marg practice? They have to do this thing, right? And so, like, it's bad. Like, it's just completely wrong, and everybody knows it. Like, everyone should know this, that this is not what's supposed to be done. That this was, like said, you shouldn't do this. Like, this isn't part of what you should do. And if you're going to do it, if you're going to do stretches and things, it wasn't going to be part of Sahaj Marg. It certainly wasn't going to ever be part of it. Like, there's people who did it. There's this Romanian woman. I'm still friends with her on Facebook. My family interacted. I think she did yoga with my kids. She's a great yoga person. She does her own yoga thing. Like, she posts regular stuff on Facebook. Nice lady, nice person. Yeah, Romanian. And, she was doing this, and I don't think, Chargy said don't do whatever you're doing, but it wasn't part of the Sahaj Marg system, right? It's just we do Raja Yoga, and, we do a whole different, our thing is unique and specific to what it is, and it's just forgetting about your body. And the first 5 limbs of Patanjali's system are about your body. And then you're supposed to forget about your body in the 5th limb, like you're learning to transition into the etheric, and then there's the 3 etheric practices. But in Sahaj Marg, it's something else, right? And it's advanced, and it's, you go right to the Pranhuiti, which you get the transmission, and then you learn concentration in a sense, but really it's meditation, and then it's samadhi, but not really, because there's a different kind of samadhi called Sahaj Samadhi, but that's not the goal. The goal is to go through these spiritual yatra points, which is not covered in Patanjali's yoga, because Patanjali was at point 1. He didn't even know about these other points, or if he did, he didn't have access to them. And so, Babaji was far more advanced as Babaji than he was as Patanjali. Patanjali was, for his time, sure, but Babaji is, transcended all these things. And in terms of his, Lalaji brought him through these points, and Babaji understanding documenting all these discoveries and then developing a spiritual practice that was effective for modern day times, and was sort of a Hail Mary desperation to give people years and years of spiritual, millions of years, ultimately, if you go to the central region, of spiritual evolution in a short period of time, because people are, it's like an intervention, right? And so, like, it's to degrade it with this other stuff was clearly not supposed to be done. And it's a big pet peeve for this guy, the dodgy truther, because he knows, because people have read the books and knows that this isn't part of the system. And all these people, all these Abhyasis are ignoring this, when they damn well know that this was not supposed to be what was done. And it's also charging people, bringing in an outsider. Like, he'd bring in Diaper Baba, but Diaper Baba is disgraced. But Diaper Baba was supposed to do that at that internationals, celebration thing they did in last fall. And, so it's just, I like I said, I don't need to cover this anymore, because he's degraded it. He's violated every aspect of the Sahaj Marg teachings and philosophy. Like, everything, he's done everything in reverse. He's doing these things that were, not supposed to be done, and he's doing them, and it's just bad. Like, it's really bad. And, at a time where, if you look at the American election and, everything going on in the world right now, the world's collapsing, and when Sahaj Marg is so needed right now, he's degraded it, right? And specifically, his birthday sucks, and he sucks, but if you had a bandara, a gathering with the master's birthday, you would be given this, what he's saying is the best way to digest it is to do something that's not Sahaj Marg, that's lower, and about your physical body. And it's silly, like, it's stupid. You get this transmission in these epic sittings, what Babaji talked about, these gatherings, and then you have to digest what you received. And doing a paid yoga, Hatha yoga seminar is not the way to do it. Like, it never was. Why didn't they do that before? They never did that before, right? They would just keep on doing Sahaj Marg sittings, and you would go and you would meditate, and you would digest and integrate all these spiritual blessings and, development that you received during the gathering. And that was always the way. And so to charge people who are stuck there and kind of held hostage after his birthday, because they're hurting for money and they have all these people there, and so why not take advantage of them and have something, some paid service, but it's not anything to do with Sahaj Marg. It's, it's pulling you out of the etheric and pulling you back into your body and making it about your physical, whatever. And so that's just, it's wrong. Like, it's just 100% wrong. So anyways, I just thought I'd throw that in there because, it was sent to me, and it's everything that I've said in the past about, the degradation of the system. Okay, so today's Thursday, August 29th, and I just did the last audio for the Journey Series 155. This is the Greetings, brothers and sisters. This is the 156th edition of the Journey Series. And, I finished the videos rendered. I'm going to put it up. It's 4 hours, so I don't want to add something even, longer. It's going to be hard for me to put it out there. But I started watching, I had finished my video for my main channel, and I'm going to the chiropractor in a little bit. I just was sort of sitting here. I'm going to take my dogs out for a walk when I'm done with this voiceover. But, I'm kind of relaxed, and I got time on my hands in a sense. And I want to get some other things done and projects or whatever. So I was listening to I'm at the 1 hour, it's an hour and 19-minute video called Reverend Chargy, Heaven, European Seminar, the 18th to 23rd of December 2010 on the Sahaj Marg Meditation channel. And the name of the video was called Heaven. The video was made, it was just entitled Heaven. It was put out, I think, on DVD. I think I might have it, or at one point I owned it. So it was a really great glimpse into what it was like to be at a gathering with Chargy, and he's very intimate with the European people. They have a small, tight-knit group in these different European countries, small centers around Europe, right? And I recognize some people there. I recognize this woman from Galway, where he said there should be an ashram in Galway, and she said, well, we're meeting, we're going to try to get that done. And I don't think she's practicing, this woman. We were friends for some time, and she started doing some New Age practices and changed her Facebook page from a friends page to a business page. And so, I had some conversations with her. I never met her, but I met other Abhyasis from Galway, Ireland. I have a connection to Ireland from my mom. My grandmother was from Ireland, and my ex was part Irish too, and we studied Ireland a little bit for the homeschooling. And, there's just a connection there. So, but anyways, I recognize some of these people. And I was noticing that Chargy wasn't, he was very present, and he gave a great talk where at the end of the thing, probably about 48 minutes into it, he's talking to people and he says, all the miseries that are in the world are caused by human beings. And what he was saying there is that animals and everything else in creation is happy. There's no miseries there. Even with animals losing relatives to predators, or, death in life and things like this. But animals are relatively happy doing what they're doing. Human beings are creating miseries. And, very interesting. Like, it's, I never thought about it that way, but, it was just there. And there's times, he can't walk on his own, and so this is 2010. He would die in 2014. This is December 2010. And I'm not sure when it happened, but he had a health crisis either after this seminar or I think the summer before. I think it was the summer of 2010. Chargy had a health crisis. Let me just stop here and I'll see if I can find that on the internets. Okay, I couldn't find it, just doing a random Google search, but I think it was the summer 2010 or the summer 2011. And Chargy went into a coma. And before that, if this was before that in this gathering, you could see his health was deteriorating. Like, he couldn't walk on his own. He had severe leg pain. And, he was there mentally, but, he was slowly, as people get older, they just can't, they're not as lucid and they're just not as sharp and things. And you could see he was weak and just struggling to make it through this gathering, to be there for the Abhyasis. And, 4 years of this, right? And the following October is when he nominated Kamlesh. He had no successor at the time of this, gathering. The other guy had withdrawn. And then when he went to the health crisis, we had no idea if he was going to make it. Like people all thought in India he was going to die. He was like in a coma for like 3 months. It was bad. And he said he went through something transformational. Like his son Krishna said, you before you were Gandalf the Gray, and now you're Gandalf the White, right? So like that transformation you see in the Lord of the Rings movies and books, um, so that's all interesting, right? But in terms of his ability to make decisions, you could see where, like, if he couldn't find a successor, like a legitimate one, he had to pick the best person available, or who people were pressuring, his inner circle or whatever. Like he had to make somebody his successor. He had 3 years before he was going to die. In 2011 October, he would die in 2014 December. So he had 3 years to make a representative. And then there's Kamlesh giving a talk. And Kamlesh, there's a part of it. There's his son Krishna giving a talk, and there's Sanskrit Kanan, the guy who's the Sharji says the world's greatest expert on Sanskrit, that gave a talk. And in both those talks, Charji's watching the talk, and he's making, he's really happy with Krishna's talk. He said it was a great talk. And he says, to something, Sanskrit Kanan, like he says something that Charji didn't know and he learned from it. And that was like, but on Kamlesh's talk, he gives no reaction. And Kamlesh is talking about how Babaji, like he's talking about Babaji and meeting Babaji. And so, Kamlesh was obsessed with Babaji. And he never really accepted Charji as his master, even though he followed him around and he was there. But, he talked about Charji in some of the talks after he was made his successor. But I think he always thought he knew more. I think he should have been the real. I think he always thought he should have been. He was better than Charji. Like there's something there. And he's talking about how Babaji said, like he gave a story where he only saw Babaji like 4 or 5 times in his life and had barely any interaction. And like you can't even trust anything he says anyway. But he says after group meditation, satsang, he turned off a fan and turned on the fan, and Babaji said, "No, turn it off." And he said to Babaji, "What's wrong? Are you not hot, Babaji?" He said, "Well, no. If the fan was on before meditation, that'd be fine. Then you leave it on, but you don't want to interfere with your condition." And he said also water. Don't drink water after meditation because you don't want to interfere with your condition. He said in India, when someone's crying, you give them water. It changes your condition. And he was big into that. I said, you want to absorb your condition. There's one point he gave a talk where he said if you jump up right after satsang, you'll abort your whole condition. You're supposed to sit there and write in your diary, which is part of the practice, and digest the sitting. And that's like how refined he was about all this stuff, in terms of he used to give talks like this all the time. But now he's taking a sledgehammer to all that stuff because he's just, after his birthday celebration was the last talk I gave. I mean, the last voiceover I gave in my 155th Journey series in a video I'm publishing on both the channels where, the Dodgy Truther sent me this thing about his having this Hatha Yoga seminar right after his birthday seminar to absorb and digest what you got in the seminar, and that's just not accurate, right? And so, I'm looking at Charji now in 2010, seeing that he was just not in good shape. Sometime in 2011, he'd give that talk about his inner circle being horrible people, like the worst people. And that would include include Daji. And so he's all alone. He didn't have a successor. He's breaking down physically and mentally. And, so there's all that, So, I mean, that kind of sheds light into the situation. It was kind of doomed from the start. And I can't think of somebody that could have done a better job in terms of, or could have done a good job. I think anybody could do a better job than Kamlesh, right, at this point. But, in terms of, anybody who just wouldn't have gone full corruption and dissing Charji, like those two things. If a person was just had a little bit of shred of integrity and honored and felt grateful for Charji's, contribution to his life and working on him and all the things Charji gave him, and just celebrated Charji's birthday and, had some humility, that person would be better than. So that's pretty much I would say, a good, at least 20% of the Abhyasis there, and had some remedial knowledge of the Sahaj Marg system, right? But I just want to share that because, it's kind of integral to the whole thing, right? The whole, everything in terms of the system. Because Chargy had, he didn't have any fight left in him, right? He was just struggling to do his work that he had left, and he had constant health crises from 2008 all the way through. Like, he couldn't travel anymore. And then he just fell apart physically. And then, he had a limited time left. And there wasn't somebody out there who could hold everything together. Like, if he had taken somebody good, the evil people that were surrounding him, the business people, these Asuric kings, these, in past lives, these, everyone knows these people suck. And Kamlesh was amongst them. He was one of them. And so and I think Chargy said, well, I got to nominate one of them because there's no other alternative, just to keep the mission together. And then maybe on the other side they can, I don't know. I don't know what he saw or what the overall plan was, but there was he was completely hemmed in and boxed in on all sides. So it's been a good thing for me to watch, just like I'm reminiscing and things. And you can see the difference when Kamlesh gives a talk. It's almost like he's not a part of the video. Like he's, for whatever reason, he was prominent enough at the time that they included it. He gave a talk at this European thing, but he's not you can just feel it. Like he's out of sync with Chargy, and everyone else is there. Like they love Chargy, and they're there. They're there to see him and be with him. And Kamlesh thinks he's better. So, anyways, I just want to start off with this because I've just, it's fresh in my mind, and all the rest of it. And I'll continue on in the, coming days. Okay, so I want to wrap this up here. I think these audios all sort of go together. I don't know. I can't remember. It's been over the past couple of weeks, but it is what it is. It's sort of like some odds and ends of some spiritual, talks and things. Only spirituality will save this world. It's paramount, definitely important for the Apocalaughs and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.